Hello, hey guys, what's up? We are live, and welcome to the latest episode of the Movie Discussion Pocket Dimension, where time does not exist and the only thing that matters is film. As always, I am Cole, and that's Jay. Here we are to do what we can for Canadian-American relations in these strained times. Oh, what a crazy world we live in. And stuff.
While we still can.
Yeah, well, we still can, before all lines are cut off. Or whatever. Yeah, day late here, but no big deal. Continuing our Masters of Film series, we go to France for one of the greats, François Truffaut. Truffaut, thinking of just some general remarks on him. He's a guy that I always had read so much about, but actually seen very little by. I saw The 400 Blows, which is still probably his most famous film, his first one, the film we're doing tonight. Day for Night is usually his second best known, or at least outside of France. It's the one that seemed to really catch audiences outside of France anyway, Day for Night. Very different films. But anyway, he's one of the progenitors of the French New Wave, which is something we at least talked a little bit about because we did our series on New Hollywood, and we said, one of the things that happened in the mid to late 60s as the New Hollywood movement got going, one of the big catalysts for it was an influence from foreign films, and probably more so than anything else, it would be the films of the French New Wave, in that they had a certain sort of deconstructed kind of style that went against the grain of what a lot of Hollywood movies had been throughout, especially the 50s and earlier 60s, these big, grand productions that were very glossy and involved and larger than life and stuff. And then you saw what would come after, and we talked about it, and we refer you to those episodes for a deeper discussion on it. But as we said, some of these films, and one of the ones we did that's a good example came a little later that we did was The Panic in Needle Park. Something about that was it had a very gritty, down-to-earth style, and it was also very almost like a documentary style the way it was shot, which really was kind of a new thing in the late 60s, early 70s. And that comes pretty much directly from the French New Wave, where it was really about sort of minimalizing stuff and just, kind of shrinking it all down and showing us that films could be a lot more intimate and simple than what we'd seen and, again, what have been the sort of popular dominant films of the last 10, 15 years, especially at its most decadent, some of those, big epics that Hollywood was famous for, some of those historical and biblical epics, things like the Ten Commandments and Cleopatra and what have you. And whereas this was, kind of basically the opposite of that. And Truffaut's kind of interesting in that he began his career as a film critic, and he very quickly he wound up writing articles for and even becoming an editor of really the first true magazine in the world that seriously analyzed film, Cahiers de Cinéma. I think, as we said before, the French were kind of ahead of the curve from other nations. That they were really the first, at least in a wide sense, to sort of really look at film as a real art form and not, just some sort of cheap mass entertainment, blah, blah, blah. Not that, there weren't films from beforehand. It's just they had a more critical eye to it, I think, and, other places would follow suit. But anyway, in only a few years, he got quite a reputation as sort of like the nastiest critic in France, particularly because of how hard he was on French films being made at the time. He would just really rip into them and stuff, and to the point that towards the end of his career at this, he was disinvited to the 1958 Cannes Film Festival. Or the Cannes Film Festival, because they just didn't want him. And the irony would be a year later, he became a filmmaker, and he did his first film, The 400 Blows, which would win an award at that film festival just a year later. So that's some sort of funny irony there going on. So also, in addition to also being part of the French New Wave, and again, it's a domino effect overseas and what it would do with Hollywood, New Hollywood, blah, blah. He also in a kind of, well, you could say more direct or maybe more indirect or roundabout way, also instigated the New Hollywood movement, in that he was offered at one point the film Bonnie and Clyde, which he was offered to direct that. And, when people talk about New Hollywood, a lot of people say that's the absolute starting point. That's really what kicked it off. So, and he was offered that job, and he turned it down But in doing so, that led to who was it, Warren Beatty, basically getting involved and also hiring on the director that they did eventually use. So in that way, he kicked off New Hollywood in a kind of more roundabout fashion, which is kind of funny when you think about it.
Yeah, isn't 400 Blows one of the films cited as one of the influences?
Oh, I think so.
For the new wave.
Oh yeah, because again, it was like sort of like a real hallmark of the French New Wave for sure. And I saw it years ago. It's Truffaut as a filmmaker. He's very autobiographical. There's a lot of himself in his work. And 400 Blows is just a lot about his reflections on his younger self. I haven't seen it in a few years. So I still remember it pretty well. And it really, even though he would go on to do many films after that, and films in different genres, if you've just seen 400 Blows, it really gives you a great idea of what he's all about. Because his films, as opposed to some of the other guys we've talked about on here, who might perhaps have had like a certain visual style or something like that, Truffaut's, it's not really about a visual style. It's more about kind of an internal kind of dialogue almost between the audience and the director or whatever. It's really about internalizing things. It's really about intimacy. You know, it's about that kind of stuff. It's about looking inward. It's about those sorts of things, feelings, emotions, blah, 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 which we did talk a little about, although it's kind of a blend, because he also did have a kind of visual style. We talked about Tarkovsky, because I thought Mirror is a really great example. Yeah. I know our show is on Stalker, but I like Mirror so much. I kind of talked about Mirror almost more than Stalker, but which is obviously a deeply introspective film and also biographical, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, Truffaut's kind of the same way, but maybe in a less sort of overtly visual style, and again, more about simplicity, minimalization, etc., etc. So yeah, definitely one of the big ones of the French New Wave, along with Jean-Luc Godard, who they were friends throughout the '60s, and as Truffaut's fame grew, he tried to use his fame to cast the spotlight on some of his peers like Godard and, you know, get them some more exposure. And we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but this film that we're doing tonight, Day for Night, actually caused a rift in their friendship. Yeah. In fact, it ended their friendship because Godard was so upset by the film in question, to the point where after he walked out of it and ripped him, I think Truffaut wrote a letter to him, you know, defending his position. And after that, they never talked again for the rest of their lives.
Basically said he was trying to modernize it, right? For modern audiences, trying to make it appeal to modern audiences.
Well, it wasn't so much modern. It was like maybe like overseas and stuff. It's funny because nowadays, you know, this is a movie for us from the mid-'70s. It's a French film about the making of a French film. To us, nothing about that seems like selling out or Hollywood. And yet that's what Godard thought. He thought it was kind of selling out, and he thought it was kind of disingenuous. One of the main things is, you know, the film shows us, again, just let people know, Day for Night is basically a movie about making a movie, and where actually Truffaut himself is one of the actors playing the director. Mm-hmm. Although he is playing a director who is directing something that Truffaut himself would never direct, a film, Je vous présente Pamela, or Meet Pamela, which is a fairly contrived, you know, cliched melodrama. Right? And anyway, one of the things going on in this movie about a movie is that we see that there's a lot of sexual stuff going, a lot of the people getting in sexual relationships with each other. And one of the things that Godard was upset about was that one of the main character who really doesn't get in that is the director himself, played by Truffaut, and he accused Truffaut of being a liar because he knew that Truffaut had slept with some of his actresses in previous scenes. So that's another thing that I guess enraged Godard.
That's a stupid thing to point out, though. I mean, it's not 100% autobiographical, you know.
I know it is a weird position to understand. I can't really understand why he'd be that mad. I can understand him not liking the film or maybe being disappointed by it, but to be that angry is really something. You know, I'm sure there's certain information that we just aren't privy to and stuff. But anyway, this film's titled La Nuit Américaine. They even discuss it in the film. You know, sometimes when you have a foreign film, it's not always a direct translation because, you know, I think even Anglophones can figure out that means the American night. But actually it is, and they even talk about it in the film, in that day for night is called American night in France. It was a French movie term. And of course, day for night, just for those people who don't know, is basically when you're shooting a night scene in a movie, but it's in the daytime, and you're just doing what you can to make it look like night. Which is
on that. I was going to ask you what film do you think of shot day for night? Like what comes to mind?
That is a good question.
Because mine is the remake of Night of the Living Dead, because like 75% of the movie is shot day for night, and it looks terrible.
Oh, the 1990 one, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a few movies where I can notice it. I mean, I know they do it in tons of movies. I don't know if there's really one that jumps to mind. I'll have to think about it and get back to you on later. There might be something really obvious that I'm not thinking of at the moment. But yeah, so this is a film about making a film, and a lot of people consider it the best film about making films. Maybe. I don't know. I think as much glowing praise as I've had for a lot of these films we've done, I'm kind of with Jay on this one, in that we're both a little underwhelmed by this film, in that like it's Truffaut's usually considered his maybe second best movie.
Yeah.
It's also won, the Academy Award for Best Foreign Language and stuff, and I like the movie, and I think it's a well done movie, but it doesn't really have any sort of like wow elements the same way as some of these other films we've talked about, and I'm not trying to, this isn't a criticism of Truffaut, because he's done so many films, so maybe we just didn't pick one we didn't particularly care for as much. But I mean, of the films we picked, just happened to pick so far for this, it does feel a bit of a letdown if I compare it to them, but maybe that's not being entirely fair. And again, I think it's an effective film.
Mm-hmm.
And it basically does what it's supposed to do. And I did watch it twice, and you watched it twice too and stuff, but none of it really jumps out to me as particularly, like, say, classic or super memorable exactly. Yeah. I think it's certainly a well-done film with good actors and good performances.
I mean, almost the parts that I am interested in, you don't really get a lot of. Like, I was really more interested in the actual filmmaking aspects. And you get a lot more of the drama between the characters, between the actors themselves, and then you also get a lot of the melodrama, like you were saying, the actual film that they're doing, which is kind of boring and not really something I care for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's more about the human drama that is caused by the making of a film, and it's supposed to explore stuff and some of the stuff that like I read about that they say is highlighted in sort of an important theme of it only comes up like once or twice in the movie itself. Like, for instance, where Alphonse, the young lead actor, who's had his girlfriend who had a bit part working on the film just for him, she's run off with the stuntman now, and he's having some sort of breakdown. And of course, he doesn't want to do the film anymore. He's so upset by it. And Truffaut, playing the director, is telling him, we're filmmakers. It's more important to us, all we have is our work. Like, life isn't really like the movies. Right. And real life is, disappointing, and with its stops and starts and the way things don't always get resolved and stuff. The only thing we can really find solace in is the work. And he does have that conversation, but that's supposed to be, I guess, one of the bigger themes of the movie, is talking about sort of the importance of film in life. But
what's more important, real life or film?
Yeah. But I mean, if that is one of the themes, that's really the only time they really seem to talk about it.
They kind of beat you over the head with it throughout the movie. Yeah, it's I don't know.
I mean, it is an interesting look if you're interested in how movies were made, before the digital age. But as you said, it doesn't get quite technical enough if you're interested in that. Like, they'll cut away from things and not explain. But I mean, I really do like the opening, because it shows just how, I don't know, just how much control a director has and stuff, because he's saying, all right, move this car now, this person speed up, how they're really on top of every single aspect and how important it is to them, or at least most directors. We've talked about this ad nauseum on the show, especially lately when we're doing Kubrick and stuff, and talking about really detail-oriented directors that really want, kind of perfectionists and want to control every single aspect. You see a little bit of that in the opening when they do that opening shot of the people walking in the big crowd and the cars driving and stuff like that. But for the most part, when they're doing takes and stuff, it's just more interactions, dialogue and stuff. There's a few subplots running through the movie. Some get kind of resolved and some don't. One being like the aging actress that is playing the mother in it, who's like at this point becomes sort of a faded star. She's an alcoholic and she's having all sorts of trouble with her scenes.
She was one of my favorite parts of the film. I really enjoyed watching her.
Yeah, actually, what's funny is she was nominated for Best Supporting Actress, and she didn't win. But the person who won was Ingrid Bergman for who was in from that year the Agatha Christie adaptation Murder on the Orient Express. Apparently, when she won the award and she went up, she apologized to her because she thought she should have won it.
Wow,
which is pretty cool.
Wow.
But yeah, her scenes are interesting, especially this part where at first she's screwing up the dialogue and can't seem to remember her lines, and then she just keeps trying to go through the wrong door. Which is really sad because they're supposed to say, okay, there's a door right here and there's another door, which is a closet. And instead of exiting through the door, she keeps opening the closet to exit and ruins the scene. But it's hard. I don't know how well conceived it is because in that scene, she literally just sends a maid away through the real door. And nobody points that out to her to help her remember. Because she talks about how hard it is. Oh, I keep mixing up the doors. I'd be like, literally, you see which door it is seconds before you're supposed to do it because you send the maid out. Because there's a part where a maid comes through the door and she's supposed to say, hey, we're having a conversation here, go away. And the maid, quickly leaves through that door. And as soon as she closes the door, she opens the door next to it. It's like, what the hell?
She's quite drunk, so.
But yeah, I guess that's so too. Yeah, she's definitely been she's on the sauce at this point.
She keeps trying to give the director tips and look, this is what I used to do with Fellini.
Yeah, there's a Fellini reference.
She was wanting them to just dub over her lines, right? So
yeah, and they're like, well, no, because this is a French movie in French. It's like you're not doing a foreign movie here. You're doing a movie where we all speak the same language.
She was just counting.
Yeah.
Which I wanted to say this too. I watched this dubbed in English. I don't know. It was the only copy I could find, but I did have the subtitles, so I was able to read the subtitles of what the actual translations were. So.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, there are a few scenes where certain characters speak in English, so that might get a little confusing in a dub. Not that it's that important, but for instance, so the background of this movie is okay. So it's a movie, Meet Pamela, and the movie, again, we said it's just sort of a cliched sort of melodrama. It's about a young man who marries an English girl and then is bringing her home to his family to meet his parents, and then when she does, she and the father fall in love, and eventually they take off, and we see, a familial tragedy. And in the background of that, so the actress they're getting to play that role is an English actress named Julie, and the background for it is that she hasn't worked in about a year because she had a nervous breakdown, and in that time, the tabloids have been all over her, not just because of that, but because she had a very quick turnaround marriage and married a doctor who was much older than her. So there's some of that coming in that they're dealing with that. But yeah, so I mean, she speaks English in a few scenes, particularly to her husband, and also they bring in an English stuntman who doesn't speak French, so she speaks English to him a little bit and stuff. So there's little snippets here and there of people speaking English, which I guess would get a little bit lost or confusing, I guess, in a dub.
Yeah, it was the only option I had, really. But,
yeah, it's too bad.
I was still able to read the subtitles, which is what I would have had to do anyway. So,
yeah.
Were you able to watch it in just French without the subtitles?
No, too difficult for me on this one. There were only a few scenes where I was really pretty good at following the French well, and one of them I think is just because of, maybe it was on purpose because he's not a native French speaker, but there's a part where the older actor, Alexandra, is giving the ride to the airport to the husband. I followed that fine when they talked, and I don't really know why, but that was easy. But a lot of it, no, there's too many colloquialisms and too much fast speaking and stuff for me to totally do it without the subtitles. Again, as long as I have the subtitles as a guide, I can pick out. There's only a few times every once in a while I'm like, I don't know what they said, and stuff.
Is there a big difference between French from France versus French Canadian?
Not a big difference, but there is a difference.
Because I know Spanish is like that, different. different places where they speak Spanish.
What's funny is actually French from France is slightly more anglicized than French from here, which you would think is weird. In that, if you go to France, they'll use all sorts of English terms that they just adopted into it. Whereas in Quebec, maybe just because it's really important to them to cling to their, Frenchness, they will reject that and use a French thing. For instance, just in a simple thing, something, if you watch basketball in France, they'll call it le basketball, which is pretty darn simple. Whereas in Quebec, they will insist on calling it ballon panier. So there's little things like that.
Is that a literal translation of basket and ball?
Yeah, pretty much. Although it doesn't always work that way, as like you said, and whenever you're doing languages, you can't always, direct translations don't always work because of things like that. But yeah, so I actually have an easier time, and pretty much the French I learned is more based on France than Quebec. Really, the French that I learned in school and stuff, that kind of stuff is stuff that you kind of just pick up on your own later on if you go to those places or live in those places and stuff like that. It's not really taught. I live in Nova Scotia, which is just like all the other provinces. Quebec is the only French-speaking province, and there's only one bilingual province. It's the one next to us. It's New Brunswick. That's the only province that is considered bilingual. In the east and south part, it's pretty much all English. But if you get north and west, up near the Quebec border, it's very French and stuff like that. But Nova Scotia does have little pockets of people that can speak French, and there is one French-speaking community. It's actually in my native Cape Breton called Cheticamp and stuff like that, and they're Acadians, and Acadian French is just nonsense to me. I have so much trouble with Acadian French because they just do so many different things with it. It's confusing. So it's funny, so if I go to Cheticamp, I have a lot of trouble, which I haven't been in many years. It's just this little fishing village and stuff. And obviously everybody there can speak English, but when I've been there, I've tried to listen to people and understand them. Although I haven't been there in 8 years and stuff, and I have a lot of trouble with it. I remember once, one of the only things they have there is they have a quilt making industry where they have old women that make authentic quilts. And I was in this store where they made the quilts, and there were two women who worked in the store, and they had some French radio program on in the background while they were talking, and I could understand nothing. I was like, what were all my years of school for? I didn't know what the hell they were talking about or what they were listening to. I found it very difficult. But if I go to, say, the Fortress of Louisbourg, also in Cape Breton, where they will speak French to you as part of Colonial Williamsburg. Louisbourg's kind of the same deal. It's actually a lot better than Colonial. It's a lot better than Colonial Williamsburg, to tell you the truth. But anyway, they will speak English to you if you can, but they always greet you in French because because back in the 1700s it was a French fort. It was France's first toehold in North America, was Louisbourg. And anyway, so they have the whole thing where they have the soldiers and all the people dressed up and acting and stuff like that. They'll all address you in French first, and if you absolutely can't understand them at all, they'll switch to English to help you out if you're a tourist and stuff. But anyway, all that French is easy for me because it's France French. It's all authentic because it's before Acadians even sort of exist, or around the time Acadians were, that stuff. So. Yeah, language is a really interesting thing. I'm always really interested in languages and stuff. And I'm disappointed that French is the only other language I can really speak. And I'm disappointed in how my French skill has eroded over the years without me using it. I try to use it, but even within just knowing one language, there's just so many different little things and idiosyncrasies and stuff to know about. So yeah, it's funny. So in watching a movie like this, there are scenes that I followed very well, and then there were scenes there where I would have been, because sometimes every once in a while, you're right, I test myself. I'll close my eyes so I don't see the things, and I'll have to open them after about 10 seconds, kind of I just lost that, So it's funny how it works. Maybe that's just me. Maybe it's just my really weird, uneven French knowledge. I don't know, but yeah. So this movie, there were scenes I could follow quite well, and other not so much and stuff. So
yeah.
For instance, I found this movie a lot harder to follow, without reading subtitles than, say, the other French film we did, Eyes Without a Face. Eyes Without a Face I could follow pretty well most of the time, for whatever reason. And you know, that might not mean anything. You know, that there might not be any real underlying reason for that, you know, beyond something that just has to do with me personally, rather than saying like there's any sort of real difference in the way that people speak in the movies. I couldn't tell you. But yeah, Truffaut himself never learned English, but he could speak it here and there in bits. In fact, he said when he did his little bit part in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that when he was doing it, he was going to learn English, but he never actually wound up following through on that. And he always kind of regretted that, because he could, you know, speak snatches of it here and there, but he never really had a working knowledge of the language, and it was sort of a regret in his life. It was something he wished he could have done.
So that was just like a phonetic thing. He just kind of.
I believe so. It was a phonetic thing, you know, probably just some practice with. Again, he knew things. He knew some bare essentials here and there, but he was not equipped to, you know, converse and have conversations in it. Really, no. From my understanding of it. Anyway, as we said, Truffaut, in addition to being one of these great masters of film, was a true fan of film, and you get to see a little bit of that. He shows again in this, in that when his character, the director, has some books that he ordered, he opens up the package and you see that there are books on, you know, various filmmakers he looked up to, including who was it, Hitchcock and Bergman and a few other people that we've mentioned. And his idol has always been Hitchcock, and he actually wound up striking up a good friendship with him. And they did in the 60s a series of interviews together that he would turn into the book Hitchcock Truffaut, which is a book I'd really like to own someday. I look at it every once in a while. They did a few years ago turn it into a documentary, which I've watched, and it really makes me want to own the book, which was sort of dismissed at the time, but that was also, again, it was the the late 60s, and I don't think people were so interested in that kind of stuff. And nowadays, it's you know, very respected and interesting. So it's definitely a book I want to check out, because it's really cool, again, that he and Hitchcock were such close friends, and neither Hitchcock didn't speak French and he didn't speak English. So a lot of their stuff was, you know, through translators and stuff, which is kind of funny. And yet, when I've seen some of their little conversations and stuff, how they agree on so many points is really quite interesting. But yeah, so Truffaut was really what we would sort of call an ascended fanboy, and that first he was a critic. Exactly. He was a critic, and then he became a real filmmaker. And I wouldn't say he has too much in common, but this did strike me later on when I was looking over his works, is that when we were talking about extolling the virtues of Kubrick, we were saying, you know, not only is Kubrick, you know, this really good filmmaker, but look at his body of work. Look how he's tackled all these different genres and stuff. Truffaut too. Truffaut's all over the place with genres, as it turns out. You know, he did dramas, obviously, but he did a gangster film, Shoot the Piano Player. He did several romantic comedies. He did several thrillers, like Confidentially Yours and The Bride Wore Black. He actually was not a fan of science fiction, but he did do one sort of science fiction movie, which is The Adaptation, and his only English language movie, which is really challenging when you think about it, to be a French person who doesn't really speak English, directing in English. And that is, anyway, the 1966 adaptation of Ray Bradbury's book, Fahrenheit 451. And again, if you're wondering why he did that, if he wasn't really into science fiction, it was because he's such a big fan of books. It was really the book message. And not to get too off track here, but I recently watched HBO's version of that had, I think, Michael B. Jordan and Michael Shannon in it.
Oh, really? How was that?
It was disappointing as hell.
Really?
To tell you the truth.
That's surprising.
I felt like it just barely, like, both those actors are good. Like, nothing about the actors. I just feel like, I don't know, it felt like a very shallow sort of just surface scraping of the book. Like, here's the book and everything is in here. It felt like they just sort of did this, you know, it just had like window dressing from the book. Like, yes, obvious, okay, it's a future society where books are banned and firemen burn them, blah, blah, blah. It's funny too, but one thing that's kind of neat about the movie, it helped me make a connection that I was too stupid to make years ago. And that I assume you're familiar with, like, you know, the setting of Fahrenheit 451. That's fine. Okay, so I should have seen this years ago, but it took me seeing this version because it's more futuristic. Like, if you watch the 1966 one, it really plays down the sci-fi stuff from the book. In fact, the society doesn't seem very technologically advanced. It just seems like, okay, here's an alternate timeline where they were books.
Wasn't the book like that? I mean, was it really futuristic in the book? It's been so long since I've read it.
The book is more futuristic, not like super crazy, you know, teleporting, flying car stuff. But yeah, the book had more stuff that was dropped from the 66 thing. And anyway, in this version, this HBO version that came out this year, it is quite futuristic, you know. So, you know, they have got, you know, big holovid screens and all that stuff, and everything's very slick looking. It's this future world. They'll have like big broadcasts to the public, and they'll be like played on screens like across like big skyscrapers in the city and stuff like that. It's very slick looking, and it actually took me seeing the movie with that slick futuristic look to it to finally make the connection that I was too stupid to make. In that a movie that I like a lot, even though it's not very deep, that I just love stylistically. One of my favorite movies stylistically is Equilibrium. And that Equilibrium is basically the same goddamn thing, except they take out books and make it emotions. Because Equilibrium is that story. It's about a guy whose main job is to enforce that crazy oppressive law and go after the people that are breaking it, who eventually comes around to the other side and becomes a hero for the underground, going against, because that's what's going on here in 451. I watched Equilibrium for years and never made that connection, although it's ridiculously obvious. I didn't make it until I watched this version, and you know, it had sort of a same sort of, you know, futuristic glossy look that Equilibrium has, and I was like, oh my god, because Michael B. Jordan's basically doing the same thing that like Christian Bale did in Equilibrium, except, you know, there's not gunplay and, you know, stuff. But I would definitely recommend watching it, but it's certainly a disappointment. It doesn't hold the candle to the book or the 66 version.
I'm actually more interested in that 66 version.
Yeah, the 66 version is pretty good.
Yeah,
it's a pretty good adaptation. Although, again, still, you need something between the two, really. Something that has the slick sort of futuristicness, but has like more of the in-depth stuff, I guess, of the 66 version. They made some changes, obviously, to the 66 version from the book. In fact, they give it sort of a happier ending, in that there's a character that gets killed in the book that they get let live. And I think Bradbury later said he thought that was actually better. I don't know if that was Truffaut's idea or not. But that movie will always be the outlier for the obvious reason, of course. One, that it's in English. It was also his first color movie. But I haven't seen it in a few years, so now it really makes me want to see it again, because I'm just sort of in that mode, having, you know, just watched the newer movie. But just trying to think if there's anything else that really stands out about it. But yeah, as far as this new version goes, Jordan and Shannon are both good. Like, Shannon does what he does. He's a very intense guy. You know, he's the more dedicated one. He's the one that is taking Montag under his wing and teaching him all this stuff, and then gets so mad at his betrayal, of course. You know, Shannon's pretty good at that, like being a really sort of intense type guy. And we recently saw him doing it, of course, in Shape of Water.
Yeah, I loved him in that.
Yeah, he almost feels this. I mean, in a movie about like a crazy, like water, like cool, like mystical water creature, you know, which is really something because of how good he is in it. So he's playing almost a similar-minded character in this, obviously a very different setting. But I mean, you know, still some of that intensity and that complete tunnel vision that like my way is right. Like, I am doing right. I might have to get tough and it might seem harsh, but it's the right thing to do. Like, he does that in both movies very well. But I don't really know how I got on this tangent and stuff before I talked about it. But yeah, so that was always sort of the outlier for Truffaut's movies. And that makes the three I've seen. Obviously now I've seen Day for Night, I've seen The 400 Blows, and I've seen Fahrenheit 451. But he's got several that I'm really interested in. One would actually be the one that he did right after, well, not right after, but the one that followed this up. Now I'm forgetting the title. Shit. It has a woman's name in the title. Small change. The Story of Adele H. That's the next movie he did that. I've always read about it and been interested in it because it's actually set, a good portion of it is set where I live in Halifax. It's not shot here, but it is set here. It's a historical drama and it's about Adele Hugo, who would be who was the daughter of the famed French novelist Victor Hugo. You know, he wrote Hunchback of Notre Dame and Les Miserables and stuff like that. It's about her life, and I didn't know this until I was reading about this thing. But there's a part where she's living in Halifax, which of course is part of the British colony at the time, and she falls in love with a British. I think he's like a naval officer who's stationed there at the time. Yeah, so Halifax was founded in, I think, 1749. It was a British outpost because of its strategic place, strategic harbor, and stuff like that. It's funny. That's what people have been arguing about today since Trump did that thing about the War of 1812. People were arguing about you know, the British's activities and how anyway. You must have read something about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because people were just like, well, actually, it was the British that burned down the White House in 1812, not Canada. And that is true. So just to set things straight, yes, it was a detachment of British troops. And a lot of people say this was Canada didn't have Confederation until 1867. So, yes, Canada was not a country in 1812.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that the people living here weren't kind of like Canadians. There were Canadian militia who fought in the war who maybe the country didn't exist yet, but still would have been more Canadian British. They were, you know, they were born here, they had parents who were born here, etc. It's the same argument I make. It's like, because if you would just say, oh, they're just British colonists and they're not really anything, so it doesn't count as Canada. That's kind of like saying, you know, the Americans didn't win the War of Independence against the British. That's like saying, well, the British just beat other British. No, by 1776, the British colonies that would become America had, you know, established a new identity for themselves because they'd been born there, they had parents there, they had roots there, they'd never been to England. Same sort of thing. So anyway, not to get in a whole thing like that. So yeah, people sniping back and forth like it really fucking matters. Every once in a while, it's a joke Canadians like to make. It's just a joke, you know, like, oh, we burned down the White House in 1812. Whatever, you know. But it's hilarious that that he finds a way to put that in the news again, like it really fucking matters. Oh my god. 1812. That was an American war of aggression, though. The U.S. did try to invade the Canadian territories and was repelled. So that's the thing that sets everything off and stuff like that. If you see anything, you know, you'll have people having flame wars and stuff like that about, like, you know, and then you always have like some uppity person saying, well, you know, who cares? You know, now America could invade Canada anytime they wanted. I guess so. You win, I guess. Sure. I'll never understand the mindset of people that flip out over historical things like that, as if it's some sort of contest or something like that.
Right.
You know?
Well, I mean,
countries have wars and they win and lose them, I guess, but that's really not really a good way to look at life anyway. You know, you shouldn't look at life as a series of wins and losses, which, again, not to go all political again, but if I want to get on my soapbox about Trump, that's, I think, one of the sad things about him is that I think he just thinks that life is about winning and losing, and he just puts people in the categories. There's winners and there's losers and no in between. And I think it's a very sad way of looking at things. Anyway, let's get back to this. So yes, the Story of Adele H is definitely the one I want to look after that. As far as the 400 Blows goes, several movies he made after that were sort of like, kind of like spiritual sequels. Like they weren't, I don't know if they're, actually I think of them were direct sequels. I think they did continue the story of that same kid when he's a bit older. I need to double check on that, but I think that's right.
What kid was this?
The kid from the 400 Blows.
Oh, okay.
I think he made like 2 or 3 other movies later on that I think actually had the same kid. Maybe it's not the same kid. Again, I'm not sure if it's... I'll have to look into it. I don't know if it's a spiritual successors or if they're actually following the same kid. I guess I should have double-checked on that a little bit. But anyway, getting back to this movie... before I horribly derailed it. This is stuff. Yeah. So we had that whole situation of the big sort of movie star actress coming in and everybody being a little bit worried about her state of mind because she'd had that breakdown and stuff. And there's a lot of stuff about, you know, all these things that can go wrong to stop a production. And there are some little hiccups. For instance, there's an actress who's playing, like, I don't know, she's like the secretary or something to the family and she's pregnant. And they find it doesn't show in the shots, but they're worried, you know, that she has to come back and shoot in like 6 more weeks. You know, it'll be showing a lot by then. That can really mess things up. So, you know, just little things like that, but they don't really amount to much. It really swirls around the idea of the director trying to manage all this stuff. I mean, it conveys that pretty well. Like, it opens with him saying, you know, being a director means everybody's asking you a million questions, which is true. It's just sort of him, like, it's almost like some sort of Aaron Sorkin bit where he's walking around and people keep walking up to him and talking to him. Well, you know, we need you to do this. What do you think about this? Hey, what about this? This, you know, and he has to keep, like, signing off on all these different decisions, because that's basically true. If you're a director, the buck stops here with you. You have to make all these decisions. And it did make me reflect on sort of the contradiction of being a director, and that, like, people are in your face all day, and it's always about managing people and dealing with people, this department, that department. You're surrounded by people, and yet it's probably a very lonely existence when you're working. You always have people, and you're always dealing with people, but everything is up to you on your own at the end of the day, and you have to. And there's not really anybody you can confer with exactly. There's no, like, co-director. It's you. So in this, he does sort of have, I don't know what her job was. What was Joelle's position? Was Joelle, like, she seemed pretty, at first I just thought she was an assistant, but then later she's helping him, like, rewrite dialogue and stuff. So I wasn't entirely sure what Joelle's position on the movie was. It seems like it must have been a lot more higher up than just, like, assistant.
Yeah, I thought just like assistant too.
But as I said, later on, there's scenes where, like, he's trying to rework dialogue to, like, account for something that happened and stuff. Like, he does have, like, a co-writer that he works with sometimes, but he's not there. He's in Japan working on something himself. He brings that up. So he bounces ideas off her. So maybe she is just his assistant. So maybe they do that. But anyway, Joelle was one of my favorite characters because I liked how sort of nothing fazed her. She was very, very professional through the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas certain characters like Alphonse is obviously not very professional at all. He's, as they point out, he's kind of a really immature guy. The way he reacts to things. I mean, at one point, getting to sort of the crux of the drama of the movie, after his girlfriend who he proposed to, has run off with the stuntman. He'd had a friendly relationship with Julie, the star, and then she winds up sleeping with him.
Yeah.
But it's more or less pity sex.
It's exactly.
You know, and he mistakes it for love right off the bat, and he goes off the handle and calls her husband saying, she's in love with me now, you know.
This is just one of those guys that's like that. I'm sure you've met guys like that.
Yeah.
Like if they sleep with someone, it's, you know, oh, we're going to be together forever.
Yeah. And it's not even just that. It's just like how everything is about him and how everything is that he does is super important, right? Like everything that happens to him or involves him is big and dramatic and important, you know. He's one of those guys. And there's a few times, there's a point in the movie where there's at least 3 people saying how, like, they're never going to act again or work in the movies again. Like, after this, they're done. And almost all of them, I think, changed their minds, including him. Because he's saying, yeah, I'm definitely going to leave acting after this. And then you find out he's going to actually work on the project in Japan with the co-writer and stuff. And he says, well, you know, it's good because it's so far away from my problems, which I guess makes sense. But it also shows he was never really serious about leaving acting. He's an actor. It's what he does. You know, he's not going to suddenly do something else.
He's a drama queen.
Yeah, he definitely is.
Like the second that she leaves and goes to set, he picks up the phone, gets the phone book. We used to have phone books, guys. And he had to look up the number of the doctor. And I just slept with your wife. We're in love. Like, really? Like, totally ruined her life right there, you know? But.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's an interesting juxtaposition of how some of these people working in the movie deal with the problems very badly, and some of them others sort of just take it in stride and keep going. You know, Alexandra is such a likable character, and spoiler people, he's the guy that winds up dying, which is really sad because he's sort of really an inspiration to everybody around him. Like, he's the older guy, he's super experienced, he's been in the biz a long time. He talks sort of about the older Hollywood system that he worked in under the studio system. And he always has stories to tell people about, like, you know, his experience working on this movie or that. And he's always upbeat. And in the scenes where, what's her name is screwing up, in the scenes where Severine is screwing up because she's drunk and upset and stuff like that, like, he never gets upset or anything. He remains really professional and tries to help her and stuff. You know, he doesn't get mad or anything. Like, you really feel bad that he winds up dying because he's really almost the glue holding everything together because he's just so bright and upbeat about everything. I really liked him. He just seemed really professional and friendly to everybody. You know, and sometimes people are talking about, like, some of it's about, like, Again, Alphonse, the drama queen, like he's so weird with his ideas. He's asking people like, "Are women magic?" Because he's feeling, I guess, so overwhelmed by his feelings or love like that. So he's asking different people if they think that like if women are magic and stuff like that. And I think Alexandra says like, "Well, yeah, some are, but not all, But what really you can tell for Alexandra, what magic to him is film. Like he loves the world, the life. You can tell he's a guy that loved every minute of his career, even when it got tough. And I really do feel bad that he's the one that winds up dying, although I'm sure it is important. It also shows that they have to scramble to try to finish the movie without having any more footage they can shoot of him, which is something that has happened in real life plenty of times, where somebody, in a movie winds up dying during the shooting, and they really have to make a decision about how they're going to go forward with it.
Yeah. Think of Bruce Lee, Brandon Lee, of course,
both of them.
Heath Ledger.
Heath Ledger.
Which they made an odd choice on that one, didn't they? The film that he died on.
He died on. Did he die during The Dark Knight?
No, it was the film after that.
Right.
Colin Farrell, I believe, was in there, and so
yeah, I was really disappointed by it. It was shit. It was by a guy I like a lot, and that's why I was disappointed. I was looking forward to it.
Was it Ridley Scott or someone?
No, it was the guy that did Brazil and stuff. I don't know why I'm completely blanking on his name. He's one of my favorite directors. He's the Monty Python guy.
Right.
Oh, I'm an idiot.
Not John Cleese.
No, the American.
Gilliam.
Thank you, Terry Gilliam. Yes, it was the Terry Gilliam film. Yeah, and they went in a really weird direction in that, like, his character, they made turn into several different actors afterwards. Like, they made it part of the plot that, like, the character would, like, turn into different people when he went to different places. So he was played by, like, Colin Farrell and at least 2 or 3 other people.
Yeah, it was a few other, like, big name actors that were in there.
Yeah, I better look that up before my head explodes. I remember being all, like, interested in watching it. The Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. It was the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. So, yeah, so it's like Andrew Gar... Oh, yeah, yeah, so this is what it is. Ledger was supposed to be the guy, and originally it was conceived. Ledger plays his character, start to finish. Then Ledger died, and they reimagined it in a way that his character would have, like, weird transformations. So it also was played by Johnny Depp, Jude Law, and Colin Farrell. Anyway, I remember being completely disappointed in the movie, which is because I am a big Terry Gilliam fan.
I mean, like, the past 20 years of Terry Gilliam, I've kind of felt that way. Like, a lot of his stuff has been misses for me.
I'll stand up for Tideland, even though it's not great, in that I kind of like what they're trying to do with it, but I think you're right, besides that. And again, Tideland still isn't really what you want from him, exactly. Right. It's a good movie, but it's not really what you want from him. The Brothers Grimm is just crap.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that one.
But, I mean, he had such a good run that I loved so much. Like, one of the great all-time runs for me. Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which he co-directed, which, that's a Monty Python movie. We can't give him too much credit, but at the same time, he's part of Monty Python. So, Jabberwocky, which is okay. Time Bandits, which is really cool. Brazil, which is one of my favorite movies ever. The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, which is really cool and interesting. The Fisher King, I don't love, but it's a good drama. Yeah. 12 Monkeys is one of my favorite.
12 Monkeys is one of my favorite
sci-fi movies. Fear and Loathing is one of my favorite movies, and that's the run. I love that run. That's 1975 to 1998. That's 20 years and some really great movies. It's a really great run, Terry Gilliam.
I saw the Zero Theorem, which was really weird.
I heard that too. I haven't even gotten to it yet.
And he's credited for The Man Who Killed Don Quixote, which I know that's the film he's been trying to make forever. Which has kind of been his, like, white whale.
Very much. It's lifelong.
Yeah, you hear him talk about it, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. That's good he finally got to do it. I don't know if it was in the context he wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was watching a documentary on like time bandits, and he was talking about that.
Yeah, and that's 81.
So
that's way back. Time Bandits is another one of those movies that like I've passed up the most opportunities to buy. I've seen that so cheap so many times, and I'm like, this is a good movie and worth owning. And then I still didn't buy it like a million times. I don't know why. I guess probably because I know that like, well, then I'll just get mad. I don't have the Criterion edition because Gilliam, like almost all his movies have Criterion editions. And I do have Brazil. It's one of the best movies I own. Is I have the Criterion edition of Brazil, which I adore and love to watch. Yeah, I've got the Blu-ray.
That's cool.
Yeah, very proud of that one. I only own like a couple actual Criterion Blu-rays. Again, one orc got for me, which was very nice of him. He got me The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou, which is one of my favorite movies ever. So I'm really happy to have that. So thanks, Orc. That's really cool.
You know what? We should cover that movie on here sometime.
Sure. Yeah. That'd be all.
Or another one of what's that director's name? I can't think of his name right off.
It's Wes Anderson.
Wes Anderson, yeah. Or Royal Tenenbaums, or something. Whatever you'd like to do.
I'm definitely a Wes Anderson fan.
I am too.
I understand his movies have such a stylistic singularity to them that it's very easy to make fun of him for it, but I like it,
It's one of those things that didn't sit well with me when I saw Bottle Rocket right when it came out and Royal Tenenbaums, and I didn't like that stuff. And then but recently, the past decade or so, I've gone back and watched that as well as his new films, and I like virtually everything he's ever done. There's not really any of his films that I dislike.
What I like about him is that he's a lot like in a very different way. And again, not to bring this, I know lately I brought up a lot of Ridley Scott, is that he's a very meticulous world crafter. He makes worlds that I want to live in, is really what it is. He always finds these really cool, exciting, interesting, sort of heartwarming places, and you just sort of want to live inside them. Is sort of how I feel like that town, when they always have a part where they show everything to you, let me show you about my boat, and you get to see the boat in Life Aquatic, or the townhouse from Royal Tenenbaums, that really cool island and the house in it in Moonrise Kingdom.
Yeah.
They're all really meticulously crafted, cool places that you just sort of, for somebody like me, I would just love to slip into and live for a while. I think they're really cool. So yeah. I think that's definitely something we can do in the future. Is one or two.
Maybe we could do Isle of Dogs. Just kind of spitballing here, just because neither one of us have seen it yet.
It was at my theater for about 5 seconds before it left, which really upset me because I had every intention of seeing that movie, and it just slipped through the cracks for me.
It was here for a week.
Yeah, and I had to make sure. I plan to go see Deadpool 2 tomorrow. So. Not that I'm worried about that one really disappearing, but I just mean, yeah. Yeah,
you'll like that one.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. I don't know. Let me know. I'm kind of curious on your thoughts.
I like the first one, so I assume if you like the first one, it probably falls like, because it's got more stuff in it, right? If there's a problem with the first Deadpool, there's not a lot of stuff in it. Well, this one has Domino. That seems like good reasons for me to like it, but anyway, we'll see. I know some people didn't like it because maybe they felt like all the jokes from part one had already sort of been played out, and you didn't really need to do it again. I think it's kind of what I got from some people. They felt like, okay, well, the joke is kind of wearing thin at this point, but I don't know. We'll see how I feel.
Jacob McCullum says in the comments, has anyone seen Living in Oblivion? It's an unofficial sequel to Day for Night. Steve Buscemi, Peter Dinklage are great in it.
Wow, no.
I didn't even know that existed.
Me neither, man. When did that come out? That's not even mentioned on its Wikipedia page or anything.
Living in Oblivion. Let's see. 95.
Huh. Wow, 95?
Oh, wow. Steve Buscemi has long hair.
I don't think I've seen Peter Dinklage that long ago. I'm trying to think of the first thing I saw Peter Dinklage in. I think might have been The Station Agent, just 2003. I don't think I've seen anything that predates that.
He was in Elf.
That's the same year. That's also
same year. He was in.
What's weird about Elf is like it's the role that he said he wouldn't want to play. I'm a little confused. I think he regrets that. I don't think he's happy that he was in Elf. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't want to speak for him, but I just remember like he didn't want to play roles that really played up the little person thing. I mean, obviously you can't completely ignore it or avoid it. Obviously, in any movie he's in, it's going to be referenced or mentioned and stuff. But just the whole thing about like Will Ferrell making all those dumb jokes about him being like an elf and all this stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, he thought he was an actual elf. I don't know. It's I played for comedy, right? But,
yeah, I mean, it is played for comedy, but I can understand that maybe sometimes. Maybe you wonder later on what kind of effect that scene had going forward. Like if maybe it gave people the wrong impression. It was more about laughing at a little person, instead of like laughing with them or something. Even though he does get to beat Will Ferrell up, I don't know.
I mean, maybe that's part of it.
I shouldn't try to put words in his mouth. I just remember him like saying like he had tried to avoid those sorts of roles that really were exploitative, I guess is what I want to say. Although,
I mean, it's got to be tough, right? I mean,
yeah.
You have to first establish a name for yourself, and then what work is there? You can play an elf, or there's not really a lot out there for little people actors.
Right. And if there is something, I mean, it has to really be about it. And I mean, I get it too. Like even if it's like say an ordinary drama, let's say it's a family drama. And Peter Dinklage is playing like the patriarch dies, and Peter Dinklage is like one of the brothers in the family. It would still be mentioned because little people are so rare that it would still it's not like nobody would ever commented on the movie. It'd be really weird if they didn't.
It'd be like if you were an albino or something. I mean, you had a big birthmark on your face. It's got to be mentioned somewhere.
It has to be acknowledged. To ignore it would be ridiculous. But again, at the same time, yeah, like you said, like he can't play James Bond. He can't play.
Well, I mean, nobody's writing for that. Like.
Yeah.
But
so I mean, I really respect the little people like Peter Dinklage that have managed to have a career because again he's.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's gotten out of it a little bit, but I mean, even look at Game of Thrones. I mean, every time he meets someone new, they make a comment that he's a dwarf.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's in a world where that's really played up, right? Like, it's a really mean world, so every 5 seconds they're like, what's up, dwarf? You're a dwarf. But, like, at least if you make a modern movie, it's polite society where people aren't going to, like, always throw it in your face. But in Game of Thrones, everybody's throwing it in his face because that's the world, right?
Well, yeah, I feel like we live in a society where we would go out of our way not to mention it,
Exactly. Whereas Game of Thrones, it's like the opposite. Right. It's like a harsh, brutal world where people just say whatever the hell they want and only the strong survive, blah, blah, blah. So
he's like, I'm a dwarf. We both know that I'm a dwarf, so it's okay if you say that or whatever. But,
yeah. Speaking of which, also on Twitter, I got the sad news that the last surviving munchkin from Wizard of Oz has died.
Wow, that would have to be...
That's a very long life for a little person because a lot of little people, don't get to live because of health problems and stuff. Don't get to live into really long old age. So
they'd at least been in their 80s or 90s, right?
Yeah, I mean that's 1939, and even if they were like a kid,
they were like 10. Yeah, wow, that's old. But the question is, have you seen Tiptoes from 2003?
Is that him?
That is him.
No. Like I said, from 2003, I've seen The Station Agent.
And if you wonder what Tiptoes is, Gary Oldman plays a little person. It's CGI.
That seems almost offensive.
It is very offensive. I would say check it out.
Isn't that like their brothers or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, you've told me about this before. Yeah, I'll have to look into it because it sounds terrible.
Peter Dinklage is just like a friend of Gary Oldman's. He's the one that pulls all the wool and drinks and does drugs and stuff. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, not really, but It's worth a watch, I would say.
Yeah, I think I'm interested.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's worth it to see. What did I say his name? Gary Oldman be a little person. Like,
I mean, Gary Oldman, as we
naughty.
said, is a great chameleon. He can play so many awesome parts and disappear into roles. But maybe that, even for him, maybe that's going a bit far.
What an odd choice. What an odd movie. What an odd everything.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got Matthew McConaughey, Kate Beckinsale. It's got an all-star cast.
Yeah, I've seen a scene from it now. I remember that had Matthew McConaughey. Aren't they like fighting like in a hospital room or something? He's like yelling.
Probably.
I think I've seen a scene with it with Matthew McConaughey. Yeah, it's like Matthew McConaughey like finds out like his baby's gonna be a dwarf or something.
Yes,
he like
that's
flips out and he's like punching the wall and stuff or something. Like it seems like it's in horrible taste.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that scene. That's pretty funny.
That's also from 2003, so that's kind of his breakout year, I guess.
I guess so. Yeah, I was gonna say I definitely haven't seen anything from him earlier than that. So this movie that they've mentioned, 95. Wow, he was quite young in 95. Quite young.
Oh, he was in Pixels too, yeah.
Which is an awful movie. Not going to go on an Adam Sandler thing, but the one Adam Sandler movie that I gave some hope to and was totally let down by.
Yeah, it's Living in Oblivion is his second acting role.
Wow, yeah. No, I hadn't heard of it. So it's like a spiritual successor to Day for Night?
Apparently.
I'll have to look into it. As you said, there's some stuff in Day for Night that's a little too on the nose, too, I think. Like the fact that, like, while all these dramas are going on and all these production problems are propping up, we have our director who keeps getting, like, having, like, bad dreams. And eventually you see it's, like, a dream of himself and his sort of, like, what is it? It's like he's, like, a kid walking down this alleyway with a cane. Then eventually find out he's using the cane so he can pull over some sort of, like, film marquee thing so he can steal, like, these, I don't know, movie stills or something from, like, Citizen Kane. I get it. Like, they're trying to say, like, you know, he's part of the French New Wave. He's the auteur and stuff. But he really, his roots were a great love and admiration for old Hollywood. I mean, I get it. But it does seem a little bit on the nose when you have, like, dream sequences and stuff going on.
Yeah, he orders those books. And do you remember who all...
Yeah, I said, yeah, you've got like Bergman and Hitchcock and a few other names on there.
Yeah, Howard Hawks.
Godard is one of the names, actually.
Yeah.
Because again,
Bergman.
he and Godard were friends. Maybe it's the other thing that pushed Godard over the edge, that his own name was dragged into this movie he hated so much. I don't know. Godard, I don't know, his reaction seems really unreasonable and over the top, but I don't know.
In Truffaut's response, he calls him a shit. He calls Godard a shit. Oh, that's funny.
That is funny. You know, we picked Truffaut. We could have picked Godard if we were talking about, you know, a great French filmmaker. I'm definitely a fan of the movies of his I've seen. Breathless is a really amazing movie, and it's one of the cool, like, stylistically really cool movies that's been super copied in the decades since it came out. It's one of those movies that just has a real just air of cool running through it that a lot of people like Quentin Tarantino and stuff were really influenced by. So Godard himself was a really cool filmmaker. And again, another guy that I definitely need to explore more depth. He's still alive, of course. Until 84. He died at the age of 52, which is too bad. That's not very long life. He probably would have had more films in him.
Brain tumor, right?
I believe so. I think that's what I read. I read it earlier today.
That's unfortunate, man. It's like a lot of these guys were seeing the same type thing, where you wonder how many more movies they would have made.
Mm-hmm. Godard, just like Truffaut, is interesting in that they both, even Godard even more so because he's lived longer and has continued to make films to this day. They both made a lot of films, but they're both still kind of known for their first one, and that Breathless was his first one. Came out just a year after The 400 Blows. It came out in 1960. But there's a few other ones, particularly from that period in the 60s, I really wanted to see. There's one from 1967 called Le Chinoise. about young revolutionaries living in Paris. It's sort of a political film that I've always been really interested in that it, in some ways, it's kind of loosely based on, what's that, a novel by Dostoevsky that I don't know very well called The Possessed. I guess it sort of follows some of those beats. Anyway, it always sounded really interesting. It was one I definitely wanted to get into. I think it would be hard to find, though. But as we said, we picked Truffaut, but we could have done Godard, too. They're both, I would say, probably equally revered in the world of French cinema, or world cinema, as you call. But so, you know, probably sometime down the line we'll even do a Godard film. Doesn't have to be part of this series, but, you know, just for the hell of it. Maybe even just Breathless, because it's such a cool film and has so many cool things going on in it. It's actually one of the few times an American remake is actually even pretty decent. There's a 1983 remake of it with Richard Gere that I like quite a bit.
Yeah, I think I've seen both.
It's not obviously as good as the original, but it's pretty respectable, I'll say. One of the things I like about, of course, the Breathless remake is that there's a scene where he is reading a Silver Surfer comic and talks about that, which is pretty cool.
The remake is in color, right?
Yes. Yeah. I think the actress opposite Gere is French herself.
Valerie Caprisky?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, French.
Yeah, she's very beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
It's a movie I haven't seen in a long time either. But anyway, as far as like remakes go, it's pretty respectable, you know, with so many terrible remakes. Especially when you think it's like a remake of a really well-known classic film. Like, it definitely isn't as good as the original, but I would say it's, you know, pretty good. It's certainly not like one of those movies where you're just like, oh God, why'd they do that, or an insult to it, you know, anything like that. Again, getting back to Godard and his style and stuff in the French New Wave, New Hollywood. When I talk about the original Breathless being so influential, actually one of the first movies, like well-known movies that it really influenced was Bonnie and Clyde. There's some stuff in Bonnie and Clyde that comes almost directly out of Breathless, as far as some of these the visual stuff going on, like the way Warren Beatty's character looks in certain things with the fedora and stuff like that. But there's several times where there's like almost exact visual cues lifted from Breathless put into that movie. So, as I said, when you're talking about the French New Wave really getting the New Hollywood era going, like I can't overstate that. They really intermingle and overlap and stuff. And it's pretty cool when you can reflect on the different movies and the way they influenced each other and parts of it and stuff like that.
Well, you know, talking about the New Hollywood movement, a lot of those guys really like this film, Day for Night. Like Spielberg, it's one of his top 10 films. Scorsese loves it. Of course, Siskel and Ebert both loved it quite a bit.
And of course, ever since we started this show, there was a film we talked about doing that we haven't gotten around doing. You know, that's another French film from the era, Le Samurai.
Oh, right.
And we will eventually do that film because I love it and stuff. And I think Le Samurai almost feels like it's in the same world as Breathless. It has so many similarities going on. I actually like Le Samurai more. It's always been one of my favorite films because it just had such a great, look to it, and it almost invented, you know, neo-noir. You know, you talk about film noir that really its heyday was in the 40s, and it, you know, a lot of people say Touch of Evil in 58 or whatever was the last true noir film. And nowadays we live in like neo-noir. People talk about one of the first neo-noirs being Chinatown in 1974, but The Samurai totally beats it to the punch in 67. I feel like Le Samurai is the one that really set the template for neo-noir, which is always something I've really enjoyed. I like noir and neo-noir. And it's just, again, one of those really cool movies. And it's had the arc, too, of it influenced one of my favorite movies from the 70s, The Driver. And then, of course, Drive is kind of a remake of Driver and stuff. And so you see that. And all three films have so much in common stylistically and sort of the way the plot works out and stuff, too.
Yeah, they're all good movies, too.
Yeah, they're all really great movies. There's even some stuff in one of my favorite gun fu movies, The Killer, by John Woo. The Killer has almost a similar plot to The Samurai. There's some very similar plot beats going on, and again, it's about a killer getting involved with a blind woman and stuff like that. So yeah, so yeah, it really has its footprints in a lot of like cool like noir action stuff, and has been done really well.
I'm gonna go out
So
on a limb
that is a
here.
film we will eventually cover because I think we both like it a lot. So,
I would love to do some Blue films.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, ever since we first were putting together the idea of just doing this show, we were throwing out ideas of films we could cover. The Samurai was like on the very first list we made, so we will get around to it. So yeah, so got a couple more to go in this series, and then we'll see. We were talking about me doing maybe even doing some horror just for fun in the summer.
Yeah, sounds good.
So we'll let you know how that goes as things occur to us. Not to get ahead, we still got the show here, but just to let you know, we got 2 left in the series. Next week, we can't give you the film yet, but we're going to do Alberto Fellini, the Italian, and then we will end with Japanese, who I think is criminally underrated and overlooked, Yoshihiro Ozu, I like him so much it doesn't even make sense. So I'll try my best not to gush too much because I mean, again, his movies are very sedate and not for a lot of people. Because not to jump ahead because we're going to talk about it eventually, but his movies are about contemporary Japan, like in the 40s and 50s, ordinary everyday people, black and white. He's not a guy that genre hopped. He basically did sort of like, very slice of life kind of dramas. And that's not usually a type of movie that really excites me. I mean, there's some movies I like, but I just think nobody did it better than him. I just think how he did. And and I don't want to get too hoity-toity on here, but when people talk, about like the language of film and stuff, I feel like Ozu's the guy that really got that and really expressed it so well. And anyway, we'll get to that. So that's what's in store in the next couple of weeks to finish off this series. We will end with Ozu.
I don't think I've seen any films by Ozu, so I may try to watch a couple just to get a feel for his style whenever we decide what we're going to do. But yeah, I was going to say I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that Jean-Pierre was a very popular name around the 30s or 40s because there's 2 guys in this film named Jean-Pierre, and then the director of La Samurai is Jean-Pierre.
Yeah,
Jean-Pierre Melville.
That's right. Yeah, I forgot to name check him there, but yes, that is true. What's funny is there's a part in Brooklyn Nine-Nine where some of the characters are talking about their favorite cop films, and of course the running gag is that Die Hard is the favorite film of Jake, the character, the main character played by Andy Samberg, but they're naming their films too, and the guy that Terry Crews plays, the sergeant, he's the more cultured one, and he says, Terry loves foreign films, and he says Breathless, but they accidentally gives credits that to Truffaut.
Really?
Yeah. I can't remember what episode it is, but in that episode he says Francois Truffaut, Breathless, but that's wrong because that's Godard.
Yeah, it's a pretty big mistake too.
Yeah.
Well, I guess not huge, but I mean, pretty easy one to fact check these days.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some other stuff about French New Wave. I mean, I think I've covered it pretty well. I mean, because it's not like you can just, they were all different films. It's not like they all were exactly the same. That's the point. But, things that characterized it. They said that when I was talking about him working for Cahiers de Cinema, it was funny because he was such a vicious critic specifically of French films. He was really critical of specifically the films that France had been making after World War II. He felt, they were overly sentimental and blah, 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 or trying too hard to maybe copy Hollywood and stuff. And then he would go on and be a catalyst in the New Wave movement. I was trying to think of some other things that sort of characterize that. Pretty standard now when you think about it, but, things that'll be like, the narrative would be a little maybe fractured or something. A lot of the idea is subverting and defying the expectations of the audience in the way these things go forward. I mean, everybody talks about the 400 Blows being the first one, but debatably there was one by Charbois, it was called Le Beau Serge. Although it's not nearly as well known, people who are like, you know, into French New Wave and say, well, technically that was probably the first one that expressed the style, yada, yada, yada. So I don't know much about it. It's just been name checked there. But it's arguably the first of the movement. But anyway, so you know, some of these techniques that you see, these were, you know, handheld camera, long shots, some of the rambling philosophical narration here and there. One of the things that's funny that I never really thought about until, of course, and they even talk about it in this movie, is that the French New Wave actually brought in references to other movies. That wasn't really something that happened in other films before that. And of course, they reference a few, including Godfather, which is kind of cool because they're talking about like, oh, there's all these theaters here, but they're all showing Godfather. There's nothing else to see because this is 1974, so it makes a certain amount of sense there.
Pretty big film, yeah.
Yeah. You know, existentialism, improvised dialogue, sometimes breaking the fourth wall. And these, again, are all things that would find their way into the New Hollywood movement in American films, you know, following suit, doing a lot of that stuff too. But as I said, I think the biggest thing is really kind of the minimalistic style and just sort of being a rejection of the big, flashy, showy productions. And this movie isn't maybe the best example of it, but it does directly talk about it, in that you have a few people like Alexandra talking about the death of the studio system, you know, how different it was, you know, in his day, the way movies were made as opposed to now. The auteur period being so different from the studio period. And of course, having lower budgets, and of course, initially having lower budgets, but by the time they get steamed, the budgets would inevitably go up. So it wasn't really a constant throughout, but it did start out that way. Although even when they had the higher budgets, it was still supposed to sort of emphasize more of a minimalistic approach, I guess.
Yeah. I guess we've heard others say the same thing about it. The changing of the guard there. Yeah.
It's funny too, like, also, like, if you've seen the Beatles film A Hard Day's Night, it, through like contemporary eyes, it's kind of a bewildering and confusing movie, and you kind of wonder why it was so popular in the day, except for the fact that, of course, it had the Beatles, who were the biggest stars on the planet at the time. But if you have at least seen a few French New Wave movies, or have like have a general understanding of it, it actually helps you appreciate that movie a lot more, and that you see that it just lifts all this stuff verbatim from it. Which makes sense, because they're like, we're the Beatles, we're wacky and new and stuff. What's the cool, hip, new thing that's going on? You know, and that's really all that's going on. I enjoy that movie, but there's still parts of it where I just tune out, because they just get into, like, rambling conversations that have no point, and I don't understand what anybody's talking about or why anybody does anything. It's like, now they go here, and they have some rambling conversation with this person, and then eventually they play a song. I understand why the public ate it up at the time. It was the fucking Beatles. And they were the biggest thing ever and stuff. But again, for all the years that I kind of criticized the movie, now that I have a better understanding of French New Wave, I get that they were sort of aping that style and maybe even making fun of it, because actually the Beatles were like that. They like to make fun of stuff, including themselves. They were really big on making fun of themselves and not taking themselves too seriously, at least for a while, until they imploded. But that's a whole different show, talking about the rise and fall of the Beatles. But yeah, Day for Night, I do still feel a little underwhelmed by it. I don't really get why it's considered kind of like a seminal, game-changing type film. I feel like it's a very well-executed film that has an engaging story with fairly good characters and stuff like that. And it does make some, good and interesting points about what it's like to make films and how it affects the people involved, especially back then as opposed to more now, in that, like, back then, because of the way you had to shoot, and they didn't have the freedom of locations that they have now. Now you can sort of go here, now, and everywhere. How it was a more insulated world. It was almost like living in a bubble for several months while you're doing this, right? Like, the outside world was there, but you were just these people making a movie, and that is really very truthful about, like, why so many people sleep with each other and stuff. Because I understand. I mean, I've never worked on a film, but the idea that it's almost like this self-contained world that is almost like not the real world. It's like, this doesn't count. You know, the real world's out there, but in here, you know, we just have to get along and do stuff together, and inevitably you'll have a lot of people sleeping with each other because they can, and also, you know, especially when you have like artistic, fiery people, and of course when you've got actors, attractive people, you know, you put attractive people together, they're gonna get together, which in some ways is a little disappointing in that it makes people seem so predictable. I remember like about 10 years ago, a little more than 10 years ago, there's this shitty movie that came out. It was actually a remake, and it had Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, and it was called, what was it called? Oh, crap. Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And when they were making Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Brad Pitt was married to that loser from Friends.
Jennifer Aniston.
Jennifer Aniston, right? And everybody loved that couple. In like the world of celebrity couples. And even I, who doesn't give a shit about those things, I could understand why they loved it. Because he was super awesome A-list, best guy ever, and she was just C-list television trash. And she wasn't even, not, you know, I'm being really harsh here. I'm talking like tabloid language. Yeah. I don't think she's trash or anything like that. But you know what I mean? Like but in that world, he was way above her, right? He's this golden god. And you know, she's from a popular show, but she's not on his level at all. And stuff. And I think people liked it because it's like, well, that, you know, they're really in love, you know, that proves it. He could have this person or that person, but, you know, this really works. They're really in love, and people love that. So then Mr. and Mrs. Smith was being made, and people were like, Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, they're like the two hottest actors in the world. He's like the hottest guy, she's the hottest girl, and now they're in this movie together. Oh, what are people going to say? And I'm just like, what? They're actors, who cares? And then there's like little sounds coming on. It's like, oh, they're getting steamy on set. And I was just like, well, yeah, I know. Well, they're actors. They're professionals. And then, boom, exactly what everybody said happened would happen. You know? He, like, left Jennifer Aniston and married Angelina Jolie directly after that movie. And I was just like, I just felt really kind of upset by it because I was just like, damn, I was upset that people were that predictable, you know? Like, it seems so, like, obvious that I was like, it can't really be true. Like, it's just a bunch of, you know, tabloid garbage. It's like, oh, the hottest guy and the hottest woman, steamy on set, all this stuff. I'm like, this happens all the time. Actors and actresses, and they're hot. I'm like, these are professionals. They're actors. They get the difference. Nothing's going to come of it. And then, boom, everything comes of it. The big, you know, his relationship with Jen goes down the tubes, and then they're the couple for the next 10 years or like that. I just remember... it was kind of an eye-opening moment for me because I was like, why was I holding actors to a higher standard than other people? You know, I should have just understood that, yeah, they're just as predictable as anybody else, if not more predictable. My point is, I was giving them credit they didn't deserve.
Right, totally.
And that was kind of like an eye-opener for me. It kind of brought me back to reality. Because I don't know, you see all this tabloid stuff, and you're like, yeah, that's what they got to report. You know, that's the story. But, you know, in real life, you know, nothing will come. And then exactly what they said was going to happen happened. I won't call that a loss of innocence for me because I don't care that much. It's not like I was ever invested in these celebrity couples and relationships. I just felt a certain amount of disappointment in myself, and my own naivete, I guess, because I was giving them credit they didn't deserve. It was like, you know, they're not that. Because I was like, they're not that predictable. Just because he's like this A-list star and she's that A-list star and they're both so hot and they're doing a movie together where they kiss or whatever, that doesn't mean anything. It's a job, whatever. And then boom, yeah, they get together. So, yeah, and this movie kind of shines a light on that too. It's just like, well, you know, what do you think's going to happen? Just like I don't know if this, maybe I'm looking too deeply into this, but I almost felt like this was kind of a shot at the actors, and that Julie, who to this point has been really described as kind of a head on her shoulders person and more of a three-dimensional person than like some, you know, empty-headed actress. Because, you know, she's this it girl actress. She's very pretty and stuff. She's got the tableau because of the breakdown and because of the marriage and stuff like that. But the whole point they're saying is like, well, look how she's handling it with, you know, dignity and stuff. And look, with such professionalism, you know, and, you know, she's a real person. And then her only idea to cheer up her friend is to fuck him. And it's just like, oh, okay. Then she just reverts back to, you know, pretty face actress. So your you know, fiance left you. I feel bad. How can I help? Oh, I know. We can have idiot actor sex. You know?
Yeah, that absolutely happens. Yeah.
Yeah. And in that, like, suddenly I'm just like, everything I thought about this character is like, I was giving her too much credit. Again, it's sort of like me. It's like me giving the actors again too much credit. because I always want to see the best in people, and I don't want to just say, oh, just because they're an actor, you know, like when some actor says, you know, some political opinion people don't care about, and people say, shut the fuck up, you're an actor, we don't want to hear it. I want to, so often my impulse is to come to their defense and say, hey, just because they're an actor doesn't mean they don't know anything. It's like, I'm not anything really special either, and I want to be able to be heard about my, you know, political opinions. But at the same time, like half the time, like, you know, they are spouting absolute nonsense, and it's just like, wow, you people really do live in a bubble.
Well, I mean, the reason I immediately go to that is because these people, you're talking about those actors in particular, I mean, they live in a fantasy land. I mean, they're so in a tier above regular people that
they just don't really know.
Yeah. They don't know exactly. They don't know what real life is like.
I especially like it when they sort of like just sort of manufacture causes for themselves, and it just backfires horribly, like Jenny McCarthy. It's like, vaccinations and autism. So like, she just goes for like 5 or 6 years on all these shows, telling millions of people all this absolute bullshit, using her own son as a prop in it all, you know, and it's all, you know, complete nonsense and stuff. And again, makes celebrities look really stupid, even the ones that aren't, because they'll just get lumped in with somebody like her and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, you see, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio. Actually, seems like he tries to use his celebrity status for good. Yeah, and supports a lot of things that I actually agree with, like, you know, freeing Tibet and stuff like that. You know, great. You know, go for it. But you know, again,
it's a fine line too, because I understand you could be a celebrity who's actually fairly smart and in tune with things, and you want to change things for the better, and you say, well, I have this platform, I should try to use it instead of just being an actor and making money. Here's something I can do to make a difference. And yet there's just so many people that already see you as like, you know, somebody that just wants more attention or something, you know. I can sort of sympathize with that position. It can blow up in your face and just backfires. It's like, we don't want to be lectured by you, you stupid liberal Hollywood idiot, you know, and stuff like that. So, I mean, I understand that, like, it can be a tough position to be in. So I do respect the people that do try to stand up for what they believe in. But, and again, I don't fault Jenny McCarthy for trying to stand up for what she believes in. She just should have maybe done a little bit more actual research and stuff before she took the position.
Well, didn't she come out and say that they found out that that's not what caused it?
Yeah, she eventually had to say that.
It was not the vaccinations that caused it.
Yeah. And what's funny is, like, at the height of her doing this nonsense, like, if you look up like something like mumps, which is, you know, we get mumps vaccinations every once in a while. Somebody gets the mumps, but it's it's not like it was, right? Like in the United States, like mumps cases like spiked crazily in like 2014.
Yeah, I mean, you remember the Disney World? There was a smallpox outbreak because, you know, people aren't vaccinating their kids anymore for whatever reason, and you know, people from other countries come over and they still have smallpox in their country, you know, so they brought smallpox over here and we're not vaccinated for it, so, or some people aren't. Yeah, it was like a little outbreak, but you know,
I mean, there's other causes that aren't maybe as volatile, but this one's especially bad because if you cause enough of a problem with it, you're contributing to a major health crisis.
It's like what I say, you know, like listen to, you know, a few generations ago, like our grandparents, how they feel about vaccinations. You know, they're like the greatest thing ever.
They were so happy.
I mean, they knew people that died from shit, you know?
Yeah.
So
they were so thrilled. Like,
they're great. You know, we don't die from this disease anymore. That's awesome. And you're worried about it, you know, causing autism, which, I mean, hell, I don't know. Maybe it does in 0.01% of cases or something. I don't know.
From what I can tell, it does in 0.00. But anyway. Maybe you're right. You can't say with absolute certainty, I guess. Sure.
But yeah. I mean, what would you rather? Would you rather risk that or risk, you know, dying of?
Yeah, dying of stuff that people used to die of 100 years ago that we, as a modern, better society, stamped out. And
exactly.
Like, let's bring that back.
You know.
Let's bring up the fatality rate, just so you can get people to listen and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, when you realize that you know no one wanted to see you nude anymore, you had to find some other outlet to get your name in the media.
Yeah. Can you imagine the amount of crazy going back and forth when she and Jim Carrey were together?
Oh man, I think he had her beat.
He probably got her beat in like sheer crazy, and like nowadays, if somebody like puts a mic in his face, he just says absolute like gibberish. That like,
is it a? I mean, is it a? I mean, it's fake, right? He can't be that crazy.
I have no idea. As we said, fame fucks people up for sure, and their bubbles and stuff. I don't know.
He is gone off the deep end if that's the case.
Makes me sad because I mean I like to smugly talk about how like fame doesn't seem to go to the head as much of a lot of Canadian celebrities, but somebody like him seems like a big exception. Because I think a lot of the Canadian celebrities seem to be better at keeping a handle on things and staying humble and being low key, but not always. Because certainly not him. Certainly not him.
Yeah, all of a sudden he was popping up on YouTube, like, oh man, doing the weirdest things. Just like close-ups of his face. Like, not in a good way either, like in a very cringy type.
It's weird.
I don't know.
And he used to do movies I liked.
Yeah, me too.
And not just like comedic. Like, I actually thought he was one of the good guys that transitioned into like serious acting, did a pretty good job, as I often say. One of my favorite movies ever is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. I love that movie to death.
I feel like he became obsessed with chasing an Oscar because that it seems like that's all that he did anymore, which I don't think he does anything anymore. Like he did like
the Majestic,
Kick-Ass 2. Was the Truman Show?
I like the Truman Show.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't think the Truman Show was really chasing an actor because it was actually a good bridge for him because it's still somewhat a comedic role. Like he's still sort of a goofy character in it, even though it has serious stuff. Like I always thought that was a really smart kind of role to take because it was a good bridge into like the more just straightforward drama without the jokes. Because Truman, while he's like sort of a tragic character and stuff like that, he still has like funny things about him because of where he's like, it's like, in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good morning, and good night. He's still doing some Jim Carrey-ism and stuff. I like that movie quite a bit. Especially, it's one of those movies that always seems so ahead of its time, too, right?
Yeah, I need to go watch that one again.
Ed Harris is very good in that. Oh, now let's do a tangent. Okay, so I just saw Ed Harris in a movie I fucking hated the other day. And that was, for me, very hit-and-miss guy, Darren Aronofsky's Mother. Oh,
yeah.
My God, I hated every second of that. Like, actually, maybe the first 20 minutes I was on board. I was like, okay, let's see where this goes.
You wouldn't like Mother, yeah.
But man, it got dumber and dumber until it was just crushed under its own weight of stupidity. And as bad as the actors were in it, I don't really want to come down on them because I feel like they just had absolute shit script to work with. Because I know Jennifer Lawrence can act. I know that what's his name can act. Foreign guy.
The husband.
Yeah.
Morgan. Something more. Ah, shit. Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
No.
Something like that. No.
He's
shit. The Mexican guy. I always get him confused with Jeffrey Dean Morgan.
Oh no, Jeffrey Dean Morgan's
the guy that was in
No Country for Old Men.
Exactly. Yeah.
Man, why am I blanking on names tonight? Javier Bardem.
There it is.
Javier Bardem. Anyway, again, I know he can act well, but God, he's cringeworthy in this movie. But man, like that popped up on my Netflix, and I was like, oh, very interesting. Finally, Netflix gave me something I actually am interested to see. Because I remember seeing previews for it back in the fall. I was like, this looks like a cool kind of psychological thriller. My God, no. I mean, I don't know what you thought.
I liked it a lot.
I hated it. The more it got going, the more stupid it was.
Well, you don't like anything by Darren Aronofsky, do you?
I like
Black Swan.
No, I like the drug one. Requiem for a Dream.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
That's like the only thing he did I think I like.
That's like one of my least favorite of his, but it's okay. It's just a very icky movie. It's kind of like in Needle Park. Like I don't want to watch that. Puts me in a place I don't want to go. Like Black Swan, I thought was good. Like, what about The Wrestler? Do you like The Wrestler at all?
It's not bad. I thought it was really boring. It's hard with a movie like that because that's a really like emotional drama. So the whole point is you have to really get invested and care about the character, and I couldn't. Like, I did not care about Mickey Rourke's character. I didn't respect him. I didn't root for him. I didn't, you know, I just found him unlikable and uninteresting. So it's not like it's a bad film, but I just felt like it all revolves around something that I don't care about, I guess, is how I feel. But man, I could not stand Mother. I just felt like it got worse and worse and worse, and it's so up its own ass with his navel gazing and his like, he just, it feels like he just so desperately wants to be taken seriously as some really deep guy with his biblical allegories and stuff. It's like, she's Mother, and that's man, and he's him. Oh, and did you notice him is the only one that's capitalized? That's important. Like, oh my, like, I just thought it was so up its own ass with its attempt to be taken seriously as like something like really.
Well, you just need to. You don't like the guy's stuff, so you don't need to watch his movies because.
I was still willing to give it a chance. I thought I thought, oh, this is kind of like a cool psychological horror movie, but man, I just felt like it was so dumb. Yeah, like the first 20 minutes, I was kind of intrigued, and then it just went rapidly downhill, and it just kept topping itself with ridiculousness for me.
Yeah, it was a bit long. That was probably.
I didn't find it long. I don't know.
Well, it was a bit much of the just crazy batshit stuff going on in the house.
I don't know.
Well, Pie is your favorite, right?
Pie is my least favorite. I want to end. At the end of Pie, I felt exactly like the main character. I wanted to take a drill and do my head out. I haven't watched that movie since the first time I saw it, almost more than 15 years ago. Because this is when, like, I was living in my dorm, and some guy, one of my friends there, had like excitedly, super excitedly, like, recommended this movie to my friend and I. Like, we had to see this movie. Like,
yeah, that's the same way I saw it.
This was the same year that, like, I saw, like, Memento and loved Memento, you know? So I was all ready for Pie, but no. There's an awful quote by Lawrence, too, on it. He says, the film depicts the rape and torment of Mother Earth. I represent Mother Earth. Javier, whose character is a poet, represents a form of God, a creator. Michelle Pfeiffer is an Eve to Ed Harris's Adam. There's Cain and Abel. And then sometimes, the setting sometimes resembles the Garden of the... Oh my God. Fuck. And I hate movies where characters don't question things. Where she never once says anything remotely realistic to her husband about his ridiculous behavior. Where she never once takes him aside and says, this has to stop, or what's going on. Like, where she just shrugs her shoulders while batshit horrible things happen around her. Oh, man. Again, I know they're good actors, but they just didn't have anything. For me, they didn't have anything to work with. So anyway, I don't want to go on to it, but I just thought this movie was just Darren Aronofsky just like screaming at the sky for somebody to notice him as some like brilliant auteur, and man, did not work for me.
He's not respected in his time. He will be respected in the future.
Let's see here. You know, I still want to see The Fountain, although I guess I'll probably hate it.
That's probably my least favorite of his.
That's been on my list of 2Cs for a long time. But yeah, so I despise Pie with every fiber of my being. I like Requiem for a Dream. Never saw Below. Want to see The Fountain. Was bored by The Wrestler. Enraged by The Black Swan for having no originality. I turned Noah off about 20 minutes in.
Oh, I didn't see Noah, yeah.
And then I didn't see some of the others. And then I was totally willing to give Mother a try. Mother doesn't make me as mad as Pie, but it made me pretty mad by the time it was over. I was actually upset. Because the first 15, 20 minutes, I was somewhat on board. I was intrigued. I was like, let's see where this goes. And then, oh, man. And it pained me to see Ed Harris like that. Ed Harris looked so sickly and unwell. It looked like he was playing a character who's dying, so I guess he's probably okay. It was done too well. I felt like, is Ed Harris okay? He's die.
Old, man. He's very, very wrinkly. He was doing something else I saw him in recently, and very, very old.
I mean, he's done a lot of stuff I really like Enemy of the Gates, and The Rock, A History of Violence.
He was in that Westworld show.
Yeah, he's still in the Westworld show, and he's pretty good in that. I mean, it's not a very difficult character to pull off. He just has to be kind of a hateful asshole. I have not caught up on season 2. I've only watched. I've only watched the first episode. It's gotten really confusing. My mother's watching it. She says it's gotten really hard to tell what the fuck's going on now.
That's sad. You know, they greenlit that thing for like 4 more seasons.
I loved the first season, but it doesn't really need to go anywhere after that. I felt like that was a good beginning and end point, really.
I haven't even seen the last episode of the first season.
It's worth doing. I mean, just because you've watched the rest, you might as well.
I just so put off when they do that. They just, they're just jizzing in their pants to put out more episodes of this show.
Yeah,
and it's like, why are you jumping the gun? Let's see if it organically, progresses to a state where we can do another season versus let's just, pay you to write it, pay you to do it.
Funny about Ed Harris is like, he did not have a good start. Like, the stuff he did in the 80s is garbage.
I can't think of what did he start doing?
Well, I think his first role was in 1980. It was called Borderline. I don't know, but anyway, most people remember, that he had a part in Creepshow, which is fine.
Mm-hmm.
He was actually one of the main guys in The Right Stuff, which is okay. And then it's just a bunch of forgettable crap all the way through the 80s.
The Abyss.
The Abyss I love. The Abyss, I would say, is his first good movie for me. I mean, not that he didn't do some crap in the 90s. He's in fucking Milk Money, for God's sake. What an off-putting movie that is. But I mean, a very good career. Like you said, he's old now. And still quite active, which is good, I guess. And he was in Geostorm last year. That's funny.
I heard that's a great movie. Not really.
Yeah. But how's your friend Gerard Butler?
Yeah, I'm tempted to see that because there's a podcast I follow called How Did This Get Made? They just did Geostorm the other day. I'm just,
as I've said on this show before, I'm not a disaster movie person. I don't really like any of them, really. Like,
it sounds like an interesting concept, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give it that. Got like satellites attacking people with weather. It's got quite a big cast. My friend Daniel Wu's in there. I like Daniel Wu a lot. He never quite crossed over into American popularity, but I like him.
He's working on it.
Yeah, he's in the new Tomb Raider, which I haven't seen.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't realize that was him. Yeah, I mean, check it out. You'll probably like that.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like they just lift a lot of stuff verbatim from the video game, which seems fine to me because I like the game. That seems like a good idea. He's in a really cool movie from 2010 called Triple Tap. You should hunt down. It's really cool. He plays this guy who's like a marksman. Like, he's really good with guns, and he goes in like marksmanship contests and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about like how he's on his way back from like winning one of those when like on like the highway there's like some sort of like heist or something, and he manages to fight off. And since he has his pistols with him, he manages to fight off a few of the robbers or whatever because they're like heavily armed and stuff. But then you sort of like find out like there's like a lot more to it, like that some of that was like a front. And it's a pretty interesting movie. It's a pretty cool movie. I like it. It's not like amazing or anything like that, but I liked it quite a bit. It was just sort of it's a kind of like a normal action movie in some ways, but I thought it had some sort of unique elements. Like, I like the idea that he was like this marksman guy, like who would do like shooting contests and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, he was in the show Into the Badlands, which I haven't watched yet. But
I know I haven't watched it either. It's been on my like list for forever. I keep meaning to watch it.
Yeah, that's on Netflix, so I'm gonna have to check that out.
Kind of like what Kung Fu was supposed to be, like wandering warrior and stuff. Yeah, I keep meaning to watch it and putting it off. Just like they made that show about Bruce Lee or whatever, the Young Dragon, that I keep meaning to watch. I think it's Young Dragon. Anyway, there's some show about Bruce Lee's life that's on Netflix too that I keep meaning to watch.
It's a television show?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I haven't seen it.
A dragon in the title, as all things with Bruce Lee do.
Yeah.
But I can't remember exactly what it is.
Well, I know they did the film The Dragon.
Yeah.
I used to like that film a lot. I saw it in the theater. I was a huge Bruce Lee fan. Still am.
Right,
but this is before the days of fast internet or really search engines and stuff. And I forget the guy's name that plays Bruce Lee in that film, but his last name is Lee. And it was like an urban legend that was his like son or something.
Was this Dragon the Bruce Lee story?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was always convinced that was his son. Another one besides Brandon.
That movie I like, but it weirded me out like how like full on they go with the sex scenes.
Yeah.
Because I remember that because like a friend and I rented that when it came out when we were like 12. And I remember just sort of, I think maybe his dad or mom was in the room when like that was on. I just still to this day remember like sort of the awkwardness of those scenes for me, like at the time.
Jason Scott Lee.
Yeah.
Which he's pretty popular.
Talented guy.
Yeah. He's done a lot of good stuff. I mean, it's not really very, critically acclaimed, but I like it. I even like the Dracula sequels that he did, where he plays a priest that gets turned into a vampire.
Dracula Ascension.
Maybe 2 or 3, and
he's in Time Cop 2. I've never seen that.
That's good. It's good. Yeah.
I've never seen that. That's interesting.
Yeah, he's the best part about it.
Cool.
Yeah, he plays this priest that gets turned into a vampire, and he sits out in the sun, when the sun's coming up, and he actually like is able to become like a daywalker. He like beats it. He did it to kill himself, but I guess he wasn't fully changed yet, so he actually became like a daywalker.
Yeah.
And fights vampires at that point. I think.
All his money is from Lilo and Stitch, I assume. That's probably the checks that he keeps getting. Lilo and Stitch revenue.
If you ever get a chance, look at the animation on that. The characters are really, their bodies are not proportioned right at all. They have like giant tree trunk legs and big asses and stuff. Like all the characters.
Lilo and Stitch?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I know. Super attracted to the older sister, played by Tia Carrere. And you're right, she has like giant thighs.
Yeah, giant thighs.
Super muscular, but I always thought she was hot. But yeah, it could be kind of like seen as almost like racist against like Native Hawaiians or something, right? Like the people drawing them thought that they were all like super curvy and I don't know.
We're represented in the Disney verse.
Woot woot.
But now they've got the Moana also.
Nice. Oh yeah, they just made another Hawaiian movie. Shit, what is it? The Rock's in it.
Yeah, Moana.
Oh, that's what it's called, right? Yeah. I watched a few minutes of that, but got bored.
I fall asleep in it. My kids like it a lot, but
yeah. It doesn't seem to be up to the same standard as a lot of those. Because I mean, a lot of those are quite good, but that one didn't do it for me.
This is a Disney Studios, right? Not a Pixar.
Yeah, but I mean, the Disney Studio has done a lot of great stuff too, right? Like Wreck-It Ralph and Tangled and Frozen. Yeah, but I'm super excited about finally them doing Incredibles 2, the movie I've been waiting for fucking forever for. Like, I sat back and watched them make 2 Cars sequels, like wondering why the hell there wasn't an Incredibles sequel. Now it's finally coming out.
It's coming out this month, I think.
Yeah, it's coming out in a couple weeks, I think. And I'm super excited about that. That's my second favorite Pixar movie after my favorite's WALL-E. I can't help it. I love WALL-E.
I love WALL-E. It just depicts people as just like fat beasts that can't do anything on their own. It's pretty hilarious.
Yeah, at least it doesn't pull any punches, right?
It's I could that could be our future. Like
that could be our future
in 10 years
in floating chairs, just pushing buttons and stuff. having everything brought to us.
Get our trash robots to do their job.
But yeah, Wall-E and The Incredibles are my favorites. I mean, I'm a big Pixar fan. They've had a few misses, definitely, and there are a couple that were really big hits that didn't work for me. Like, people love Ratatouille, and I'm pretty lukewarm on that movie. I don't dislike it, but I'm just like, eh.
I felt the same way at first. I've come around a little bit to it.
Yeah, well, I haven't watched in a while. Maybe I should see it again.
That was maybe the first Blu-ray I ever bought. I bought Ratatouille and my Blu-ray player on the same day.
It's funny that I can't remember the first Blu-ray I ever bought, and that I can remember earlier stuff. It's possible the first Blu-ray I ever bought was 7.
Oh, really?
Because I actually bought several Blu-rays, I remember, at Walmart before I even owned a Blu-ray player, because they were cheap.
Yeah.
And 7, I think, was one of them. I think I bought 7 and something else. They were both like $7.99 or something like that. Yeah. I think that's what it was. I bought 7 and something else on Blu-ray. Those are probably the first I bought. If I remember correctly. It'd be easier if I was in the room with my Blu-rays. I look at them, it helps me. But
I did the same thing with DVDs. I had a friend that had a DVD player, and I bought probably 5 before I actually had a player for myself.
As I've said many times, I can remember the first movie I watched on DVD. First movie I watched on DVD was Jim Carrey. It was Me, Myself, and Irene.
Oh.
Ryan and I rented a PS4. We rented a PS4. PS2, sorry, PS4. We rented a PS2. Neither of us owned one yet. We would both eventually get one, but at this point we rented it. We were playing, I don't know what we were playing, but then it occurred to us, this thing can play DVDs. This is a DVD player. We should take advantage. So let's go rent a movie. And we entered Me, Myself, and Irene. I remember we watched the movie, and then, of course, we watched all the special features because that was new.
Yeah.
Which included, like, the video for Breakout by Foo Fighters, which is pretty cool.
Oh, jeez. Lots of things to talk about there. Music videos, renting a player, which I don't think anyone does that anymore. I don't know where you would do it.
No.
Yeah, we used to do that a lot with VHS, and I think I would rent like a Nintendo before I had one.
I don't think I ever rented any systems, but Ryan did several times with rent systems, including the PS2. And I remember the first movie I ever watched on a computer screen, which I'll always hate, which is, everybody knows I despise American Beauty. I watched American Beauty in a dorm room my first, the first week I was at college. And that was, I know that's so normal now, but that was like a new exciting. This is the fall of 2001, right. People. I felt very much in the future, sitting in this dorm room on somebody's bed, like watching a not very big computer screen playing American Beauty.
Your favorite movie?
Yeah. It's funny. I saw an interview with Mina Suvari the other day talking about how sad she is that Kevin Spacey's evil or something. I was like, how does she know him? And I was like, oh, American Beauty, right.
Well, I mean, I'd like to hear, like, what was your experience working with him? I mean, why don't you say shit like that instead of just, assuming that everyone else is right? I mean,
well, as far as I could tell, her experience with him was fine. She said she had nothing but positive things about everybody on the movie, that she just loved shooting the movie, period, that everything was great.
Well, he's a homosexual, right? So, I mean, I guess she would be in the clear.
Yeah, but the thing, I guess, about Kevin Spacey is, like, besides, like, the criminal stuff that maybe he's harassed or whatever males, is that just, like, beyond that, like, not criminals, that he's just been really mean to a lot of people, like, male or female, whatever, that he's just been mean, which there's no law against or anything, right? And I can kind of believe it because he plays it so convincingly. He can play mean really well.
So. That is true. Well, I mean, if we're talking about celebrities that are mean, I'm sure we could amass a pretty good list quickly.
God, yes.
I mean, God.
Well, I guess it was just in his case that, like, it wasn't that he, however, had been able to, like, keep it from, like, getting out too much, though, right? Like, everybody fucking knows that, like, Russell Crowe is insane and mean. Everybody knows that.
Yeah, sure.
But, like, for whatever reason, with, like, somebody like Kevin Spacey, like, people didn't really talk about it or get out to the press or something. Like, it's more of a revelation, like, in the last year. I don't know why.
And I don't really think Kevin Spacey's, like, a superstar actor either. I mean, I know he did that show on Netflix, but
he's in some high-profile stuff.
I mean, not lately, though. I don't know. He's not really like A-list in my book, but
As an actor, I've always really liked him.
Sure. Yeah, me
There's
too.
some movies where he's my favorite part of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, like
honestly.
The Usual Suspects, probably one of his bigger.
Which, ironically, is a movie I don't care about.
Really? Okay.
Never cared about that movie. It's fine.
It's all about the twist, really.
But it's not a twist. It's what I have to keep telling people. The twist is he's a liar? That's not a twist. Oh, he was lying. That's not a twist. To me, that's not a twist. No. The fact that he just made up a bunch of lies on the spot doesn't seem like a twist to me. It just seems, I don't know, like a cop-out. Oh, he's a liar. And we believed him. And now he's gone.
Oh, all the shit that he just said is in this room.
Yeah. See, he's not even an inventive, imaginative liar. He needed inspiration from the things he saw. That's the mark of a really bad, lazy liar.
That's when I gave all the money to Dr. Coffee Cup.
Exactly.
Dr. Coffee Mug.
But I mean, it's a fine movie. Like, I like it, but I'll never understand its like reputation in the annals of like really great films and memorable. Like, it's fine. And to me, it's a super underwhelming cast.
Stephen Baldwin, I think, does a really good job.
Yeah, it's too bad he didn't have a better career, really.
Yeah, he's kind of
he's as good as any Baldwin.
He's kind of gone into the Christian movie thing.
No, I didn't know that.
He's converted to, or whatever.
Good. You can hang out with Kirk Cameron.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of who else has done that. There's a few other guys.
Did you do like Doomsday movies? Like, how many of like in the last year have they done like Left Behind and all these movies about the Rapture? And even fucking Nicolas Cage did one because, of course, he needs the money.
Those movies that Kirk Cameron makes, they make a lot of money. Yes,
because Christians are very loyal.
They rent, like, I mean, around here, obviously I'm in the Bible Belt.
Yeah, they'll rent out a theater.
They'll rent out a theater. The church will, and so that's, I
I get really well. Like, when you're like those really serious Christians that are like against so many things, you're desperate for something fun. So you're like, we can sign off on this as fun. This is a fun movie, and it also has all that Christian stuff that we care about. Like, so I kind of get it, right? Like, because there's so many things. It's just like, well, I can't do that or that or that. Those are all evil, terrible things and against our beliefs or whatever. They have to keep crossing stuff off. Nope, can't do that. Nope. Like, here's a good movie. It has Nicolas Cage in it. That'll interest everybody. Like, and good Christian values. Sure.
The one I was trying to think of was Willie Ames. You may not know who that is, but
no, I do not.
He was on the television show 8 is Enough and went on to be on Charles in Charge.
I know both of those by title, but I don't actually know the shows.
He has done the series known as Bible Man. He's done like 8 of these things.
I remember watching on Netflix like the first half hour of a movie called God's Not Dead, where there's a really mean, he's a really mean atheist. What is he? A professor at college, and he gets into like an argument with this, really, I don't know, Christian faithful person about God, and so, oh man, it was terrible.
I've done a sequel to that, at least one.
I heard.
Was out not too long ago.
Like, I just wanted to see how long it would take to get ridiculous, and it's ridiculous like in the first 30 seconds almost, which is amazing.
It's where people are like super evil, right? And they're like,
well, like you're super evil if you're not like, well, a Christian.
Okay. And okay.
Which I don't think is really a good message, right? But that's their message. Like, anybody that isn't a Christian is evil and has terrible values, and they'll definitely do all these bad things. It's kind of the message that God's Not Dead, the first at least half hour that I sat through, told me.
Yeah, see, I'm gonna. Kirk Cameron didn't do that one, did he?
I don't think so. I think I would have known. Because the main guy's younger than Kirk Cameron because it's a
Kevin Sorbo's in that. Holy shit.
Kevin Sorbo, there you go. That's a name I recognize from something.
He's another one that has gone that route.
And you know what? Before people typecast me, it's not impossible to make movies about people that have a strong faith in God and they're still good people and not make fun of them. For instance, there's a movie that Mandy Moore did called A Walk to Remember. It's not an amazing movie by any stretch, but the point is she's dying of cancer or something like that, and she's got like a boyfriend and stuff. But her character is like a Christian with like a fairly strong faith. And there's nothing wrong with that movie. Like, the movie doesn't make, and it's not on the whole, oh, she's amazing, she's Christian and pure, and everybody's dumb. And it's not the other thing where it's like, oh, you know, let's make fun of her or demonize her for having a faith, like they'll do in some movies. Like, it's just sort of a nice movie where, like, I'm not religious, you know, and I can make fun of religious people and, you know, all that stuff. But I mean, the movie's fine, you know. Like, Mandy Moore is a character with a strong Christian faith, and it helps her, and the movie doesn't make fun of her, but the movie also doesn't prop her up on some sort of pedestal like she's amazing and everybody else sucks. So you can pull that off in movies. It just doesn't happen very much. It's usually one extreme or the other, right?
Yeah, totally. I'm trying to, I think these are like, I mean, you don't, in order to be an actor, you don't necessarily have to compromise your beliefs. So I'm thinking that maybe there's just a market, kind of like there's a market for Christian rock.
Sure.
You know, like there's people that listen to that stuff.
Again, because they don't have any other choices.
Because you're like, you can't make it as a real band, so you've got to be a Christian rock band.
Yeah. Just play a bunch of radio-friendly or, you know, boring crap that would never get you signed, but have religious lyrics, and suddenly it makes you amazing and different.
You get money.
Like, I hate to say it, but ever watch, like, footage from a Christian rock concert? It's disturbing. Because it really feels like some sort of, like, bizarre, like, ritual. Like, the people in the crowd are, like, closing their eyes. And, like, I mean, I know you could say that for a normal rock show, but trust me, it's different. Like, it seems like some sort of mass cult activity is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah. There's a hamburger restaurant around here that... It's a chain restaurant, but for some reason it's always on the Christian rock station. I want to like go there and be like, gosh, can you change the station, please?
Well, here's something I didn't know until about the last year when a lot of articles started popping up. And we don't have this chain in Canada, but I've heard of it. It's Chick-fil-A. Apparently, Chick-fil-A is super Christian and has done all sorts of things to people like in the name of that. Like fired people and all sorts of things because of things like not lining up with their Christian values and stuff. Like, I never knew that, but apparently, like, that's a big part of being, like, if you wanted to work at Chick-fil-A, like, they, you know, they'll go around the loopholes to like fire you if they find out like you are not like what they think a good Christian is.
No, I've worked for Chick-fil-A before.
Wow. So did you notice anything in that place? Because probably not, right?
I didn't even know that was a thing. You know, at that the only thing about Chick-fil-A is they don't work Sundays. Like the restaurant's closed on Sundays.
That's part of it too. I mean, that's fairly normal, right? Okay.
I mean, I feel like it's just popular culture kind of clashes with Christians in general.
Yeah, you might say that.
You know, I mean, just it's become like, you know, a popular type thing. Like when they moved to New York, you know, they opened a store in New York, and they were saying they didn't want these Christians in their city. Which it seems kind of like, you know, I don't know, freedom of religion type thing. But, you know, like if it was a Muslim restaurant, you wouldn't care, you know. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is. But, you know, I never noticed anything in particular there. I would be stoned at work all the time, so.
Nice. Model employee.
Yeah.
I was going to get to rapping, but it does remind me of something. So back when I was in high school, and I used to drive around with my friends on, like, you know, the weekends and Friday nights and stuff, we drive out late. One of the things we do is, like, go to different, like, fast food places and stuff. And where sometimes our friends worked and stuff, and some, you know, they're usually to find some girls to hit on and stuff like that. I wasn't the leader of the group. I was just a follower and stuff. But the thing was, not to go all orc here, but my burger history had always been, as a kid, I despised McDonald's. Even as a kid, I hated McDonald's. I ate Burger King as a kid. And then I graduated to Wendy's. I kind of found Wendy's in high school. And that was my burger place into adulthood until things changed. Doesn't matter. No one's interested. But my point is, so Wendy's was one of the main places my friends and I would hit up, especially because they had a drive-thru that was open till like 1 or 2 o'clock.
Oh, right.
But we very quickly discovered that if we wanted to get Wendy's late at night, the only way we could do it and not have our food get completely mangled and fucked up was to go in. because it turned out that like the shift without fail was high as fuck. And if you ordered stuff at their drive-thru, you got nothing resembling your order. You had to like repeat shit over and over again to them. They had no idea what was going on. I would get like salads and stuff. I'm ordering like a burger combo, and I would get like things that would in no way like not even close. Sometimes you didn't even get a burger. They were that inefficient. And I'm thinking, we're like laid back high school. We're their peers. I'm like, what are like normal people thinking? Like adults rolling up in here thinking when you're fucking up their orders so bad. But they were high as shit, which is pretty funny. Because yeah, that's like that's like a super incompatible thing. Because like, I mean, I used to get high a little bit in my teens, and you know, I've had not as many instances as a lot of people. But one of the instances where I was like definitely like the most high had to do with going to, I can't even remember, it might have even been Wendy's one night. And being so baked that I was terrified of ordering because I knew I would fuck it up. So I was in the lineup for like 3 minutes, repeating my order over and over again in my head because I was so worried about telling it to the people. And I never even got to it because what happened was my friend Gerard, who was in front of us, he was quite lucid and he was ordering fine. And the girl was really stupid. And he got upset. And at one point, he just pointed at the sign. He said, "That fucking thing there." And then I turned to my friend Paul behind me, and we just burst into like hysterics over it. And then the three adults behind us left the restaurant in disgust. And I don't even remember what happened after that point. Maybe I ordered food, maybe I didn't. That's one of the only times I was like super high. Like people talk, I was super high. Most of the time I wasn't super high. Most of the time I was high. I had the buzz or whatever like that. But I was rarely super high. That time I was just like my eyes wide open, like overreacting to everything around me. And I just remember focusing so hard on my order because I was like, okay, I can do this. I can order this combo. Like it's just a combo. And I was terrified of ordering it. Pretty funny.
We would always manage to get super high, like, and then have to go somewhere, like, to be around a lot of people.
Yeah,
I would always get paranoid.
Yeah, make me super paranoid because I was like, I didn't want people to know, and I'd be like, and I would often come up with like a script in my head to follow. Like if I have to have an interaction with somebody, and I have a script in my head that I'm supposed to follow, and I'd be trying my hardest to like stick to it and stuff. And like, time slows down and speeds up and stuff. Like sometimes I'm talking to people and they're like looking at me funny. I don't realize that I'm like sometimes taking giant spaces between my words.
Oh man, I'd love to be on the other side of that.
Or other times like saying a whole sentence in like 3 seconds. Like my speech speed would really vary. Is one of my problems in that state. Physically, I was actually really good.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I know it's different from being drunk, right? Like, but physically I was very sharp. I still had good balance and reflexes and stuff like that. And I mean, again, that's more of a drunk thing than a high thing, but I don't know. I've seen people do some really klutzy stuff when they're high, right? You've seen like people who are high, like bump into things and trip on things. Like that never happened to me.
Well, maybe that's the different strains. I don't know enough about it. But
I don't know enough about it either. I don't know what the hell I got. It was always through somebody usually.
My fingers crossed on these elections, though. Come on, guys. We got to pass it.
I know. You want to live in my world, but there's a weed store right around the corner.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
I love the names. I already read you the names. I can't remember. They're all funny names.
Oh, yeah. There's got to be a pun of some sort.
No, I mean, they make it try to sound it completely like it's something else.
Like it's legit.
Yeah, like it's some sort of like legit medical center. Like that's what all the ones around here are. They're like, something medical center. It's funny.
It'd be like Harry the Potter or something like that.
I assume we'll eventually move into a time frame where that becomes more acceptable.
Oh, come on,
but at least,
why not?
At least where I live, it's like pretending it's like legit medicine and stuff, right? So it's all like, very medical sounding names.
Pain specialist, Inc.
Yeah, I haven't been in there yet, so I don't know. It'd be pretty funny though to go into like one of those places with that name, and they've got like bongs shaped like wizards and stuff or something.
I bet they do, right? I mean, I don't know.
I don't know. I'll have to check it out and report back to you.
Yeah, please do.
Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Buy some edibles and check it out.
Go show. But we can circle back to the film to wrap up here. This is one of our, since this wasn't as deep as some of others, we had lots of different places to go. So hopefully people enjoyed some of that. But yeah, getting back to the film and Truffaut and stuff. Truffaut almost single-handedly coined auteur, which was used a lot for the period and stuff. You know, French for author. The whole idea, of course, of the time when I was talking about how people prior to that wouldn't take film seriously as an art form. Some of the theory behind that was the claim against it being true art was that people would refer to it as art by committee, which they would immediately think is discarded. You know, if it's got a whole bunch of different people to it, then that becomes sort of like an assembly line thing, and, you know, you lose levels of art and it becomes a product. So one of the things about the auteur thing was the idea is that it's the idea of bringing back the individual expression of, you know, the various talents and stuff like that. And yeah, so one of the reasons that he was so critical again of films of the time is that, and so vicious again against like the French films, was he felt like a lot of them were, again, pandering stuff, Oscar bait type things. They were usually, you know, films with some sort of prestigious literary pedigree, you know, based on some big novel or something like that. You know, films that were really trying to go out of the way and stuff like that. And he sort of lashed out against it, you know. And then he would like point out like somebody like Hitchcock that would be a sort of rejection of that, but still have all this innovation and invention within, you know, within the film itself. So, his argument was sort of like that directors should be more independent in their approach. And again, as we said when we were talking about this in New Hollywood, basically the idea that when you're doing a film, despite the fact that it's a collaborative process with all these different people involved, that the director is basically the sort of the true visionary of the film. And basically, anytime you're judging a film on whether it's good or bad really comes down to basically the expressions and techniques, personality, etc. of the director. And that's why you would get stuff like more attention being paid to things like things that used to be just sort of like, you know, okay, here's how we're going to set this scene and we're going to go forward. You know, more attention to like camera setups, editing strategy, compositions, and then also how you directed actors. It's also worth noting too that like if you acted like say in the 30s, 40s, 50s, even if you were an actor and you worked with a bunch of different directors, again, there's always exceptions, etc. But usually you didn't really find your experience that different, in that no matter lots of different directors in those time all kind of had one or two different ways of dealing with actors. It didn't really start to change again until that era in the 60s when directors would really branch out and have different approaches. Again, you know, you have the directors that are more remote and kind of let the actors do. Then you have the more intimate directors that are very much, you know, right in the moment with the actors saying, all right, try it this way, blah, 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 the more intimate stuff. So that was another thing that came into it. So for the French, it was really to kind of get art, to get cinema out of like the ghetto and into like discussions of being serious, true art. And then yeah, there's also the problem of like genre directors that did stuff like film noir, musicals, westerns, and stuff, and how they needed to be judged in the same way and taken as seriously as like more of an art house director too. And that you know, anyway, the idea was like they wanted like kind of an overhaul of how people judged and looked at film, kind of. And that, of course, led to him eventually becoming a filmmaker and being part of French New Wave, blah, blah, and then into all that other stuff that we've already talked about.
I think that's one thing that kind of separates him a little bit from some of the other directors we've talked about in this series, is that he was, you know, generally a fan first, and then, you know, became a director out of that. So, you know, different perspectives.
Which is very kind of normal nowadays.
Sure.
But, you know, it wasn't at the time. And just like we said, the other thing, and this is more branching out just into the whole New Hollywood, everything, not just French New Wave, but also was you finally had the sort of the first generation of filmmakers that were trained as filmmakers. Because in the first half of the 20th century, film was so new in that, like, most of the directors of that era started as something else and sort of film through some sort of happenstance. You know, some of them, you know, even when they were adults, film didn't even exist really as a popular medium, so it couldn't. There's never a point where it could have been like an ambition of theirs. It's not like I'm going to grow up and be a director, because there wasn't really such thing and stuff. So finally, you're starting to see some of that turnaround where you have people who, you know, grew up with movies as kids, and then as they got older were film students, you know, and they always had that singular ambition to be filmmakers. This is finally the first generation of those people that are completely engrossed in it, and instead of finding film or backing into film in some weird different way at a later point in life.
You've got a lot of those guys going to film school in the 60s. You know, and, you know, it's kind of odd, you know, now is almost like the opposite. It's like, you know, guys like Tarantino will say, don't go to film school, it's a waste of time. Kind of, it's kind of interesting. But when you think about, you know, some of the most famous filmmakers, you know, that come to mind went to film school.
Yeah. Well, you'd have to imagine probably film school changed a lot in that time, right? Like the film school that, you know, some of these people went to would be very different from if you went there now. So maybe Tarantino's right. But then again, I don't know. Everybody's different. So I don't know.
I think his philosophy is kind of just like learn by doing it, you know?
Sure.
So, I mean, that totally makes sense, but, you know, whereas something that worked for him, I'd like to go and see how a lot of those different effects are created, you know, Hitchcock zooms and, you know, just stuff like that. You know, I think it's interesting, but, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess now when you can shoot a movie on your iPhone and put it on YouTube, you know, kind of a different, completely different environment. From, you know, what we're used to shooting on film, you know, 35 millimeter film, and having to have it shown in the theater somewhere. That's basically your only option. Screened somewhere.
Yeah. And we won't get into it, but another one of the differences between, say, the French New Wave and what was going on here has to do with the fact that in Europe, things like copyright were different, in that, like, directors in Europe actually could hold copyright over the films. In fact, they would call it le droit d'auteur. You know, basically in America, directors didn't hold copyright unless they also were producers. And then they usually had to work with other producers and stuff like that. And the idea of Final Cut was kind of a case-by-case basis. In some cases, it simply didn't exist. It also sort of sound.
So just the director was able to get the copyright because he directed the film.
That was usually the approach in Europe.
Okay.
Even before the 60s.
Okay. That's definitely interesting.
Again, it's because in Europe they weren't beholden to a large studio system in the same way that the US would have been. Although sometimes they were in an indirect way if they were, you know, attached to the American studios. But if it was made independently of the American big studios, they usually didn't have, there was not really any sort of equivalent for them to deal with, I guess. Mm-hmm. I mean, people still argue about how much, like, style comes into auteurism. You know, some people say that you need to have some sort of clear, obvious visual style and aesthetic. Most people think that, you know, that's being a little harsh, and that, you know, style can certainly cover other aspects of a film besides simply visuals and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not something that just happens either. It's something you develop over time. You know, I mean, like this film, I didn't think was very stylistic at all. You know, as far as the shooting, camera angles, you know, etc. It was all seemed very, you know, typical.
Yeah. Plus, and it's another thing that sort of came in a little later, this idea of style. Like these original auteurs, both European and American, they didn't really have, at the time, they didn't have any sort of notion of style. It wasn't something they were thinking about or conscious of or trying to necessarily put into the movie. I mean, they might have had a style, but it was a more unconscious thing. It wasn't something they were thinking about because, again, people were judging films in a different way at the time, and style did not really come into it until a little bit later. There was no hard and fast notion about what style exactly was. But, in retrospect or, afterwards, an auteurist could say, they could insist that probably not every filmmaker has a style that manifests itself in a way that's the same, that everybody's is a little bit different and stuff. Some are more, as I said, this movie and even Truffaut himself, he's less about kind of an obvious visual aesthetic. If you were going to talk about a style, it has to do more with, I guess, maybe feelings that you would evoke from what the characters do and say and stuff like that. It's more kind of about that than any sort of unified, say, look. Because I mean, obviously, you can look at films from like the 40s or whatever, and you can still pick out directors that had a style. It's just not something that was really talked about at the time or taken really into consideration. Obviously, it's a very loose term that you can use to apply to a lot of different things. So it's funny to me that it's something that people still go back and forth arguing about when they're talking about the auteur period and how they should be judged and blah blah blah. Because some of this stuff is it's so open-ended. There's no real way to be right or wrong about it or classify this person as this way or that, but people like to get into debates and stuff, so whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, that probably wraps us up, I guess. Maybe we'll do another Truffaut sometime, because like you, I liked this movie, but I didn't like it as much as maybe its reputation suggests, so I guess we couldn't discuss it quite as much as we discuss other things. Because at the same time, it's not like we disliked it, because we didn't really have a discussion to criticize it or say what's wrong with it, because there's nothing really wrong with it either. It's not that. It just maybe didn't make quite the same impression on us that it has made on a lot of people, and I'll revisit it down the line. I've got it recorded, so we'll see how it goes. But I still think it's a very interesting and engaging movie, and it does tell you some kind of cool things about what the experience of making a movie is like. I don't know if it's the best movie ever about that, but a lot of people do believe that. But at the same time, I can't really think of too many movies I've seen that are about making movies. One that's really cool is Adaptation, which is more about the script.
Yeah.
Which is more about the script than the movie, but still a very interesting, cool movie that I haven't seen in 100 years, so I really need to see again.
Yeah, I like it a lot too.
But I mean, obviously it would appeal to somebody like me because I'm a writer and I'm always interested in the writing process and stuff. But I mean, there's film stuff in there too. And it's kind of cool. It's got the film within a film because like being John Malkovich is like in the movie because that's like the movie that's going on while they're doing this, which is kind of cool and stuff. What's funny is for all those movies, I was never that big of a fan of being John Malkovich, even though it had all the ingredients to be a movie that I would really like. It always fell short for me.
A little too quirky for my taste, I think.
Yeah, maybe it just went too out there. Like I like the setup and everything, and I don't know, it didn't come together in a way that really wound up appealing to me. It had all the ingredients, and yet I don't know. Again, it's another one that I haven't seen in so long. But I mean, I like Spike Jonze's movies. I mean, for the most part, he did Her, which I despise.
That's one I was thinking about watching. I shouldn't watch that.
I think you should watch it. I mean, in some ways, there are things about Her that I hate that are kind of like what I hated about Mother, in that I just really found it overly pretentious.
It's just a really odd subject matter, is why I haven't seen it. He falls in love with his phone, right?
Well, yeah, like an operating system or whatever, right?
I mean, I'm a big fan of Joaquin Phoenix, right?
Yeah, and he's good in it. one of the things I will say, and I mean this is a bit of a bias, is that this movie came out in what, like 2013 or whatever, and I was really annoyed that the voice had to be
Scarlett Johansson.
Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah.
To me, that was just piling on. That was like, she's super popular right now, so it has to be her. It's not like she does a bad job. I just kind of wish it was someone else.
You know, I don't think it was at first. I think I remember hearing that it was someone else, and they dubbed her voice back over it.
Worse. It could be right. But like, yeah, that movie. Again, I know I like a lot of high concept stuff that some people would find boring or pretentious and stuff. So it's hard to, you know, this is more about personal preference, but I just found her insufferable when it came to being pretentious. And again, it has subject matter I like. I really like movies that are about like AIs and stuff like that. And this movie's all about that, but it did not go the right way for me. I really did not like it.
Samantha Morton was the original voice.
Oh yeah, I kind of like her.
Trying to remember who that is. Oh yeah, she was in a Red Dragon.
Yeah, that's right.
Isn't she British though?
Yeah, she is.
Okay.
But I mean, she can. Well, I mean, I don't know. It's an operating system, so I guess it could have worked with an accent. It doesn't really matter. But she also has done roles where she doesn't have the British accent, so.
Not to go off on a tangent, but have you heard the theories on why all these things are in female voices? All these, you know, Siri and, you know, all the, you know, Alexa.
I thought people liked that more, but there's a better theory. Is there? Okay.
It's all about her, you know, sexist society.
Oh, right. It's like one of those, like men's rights people. It's like, oh, it's all about like our sexist society where the females are like in power and telling us what to do. And oh my God, I just think female voices are pleasant. But anyway, sure.
Yeah,
you know
I do too.
You know what's funny?
I would want a male voice. Hey Siri, what?
I don't know. There's a episode of what is it? The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror, where they have like a smart house and they can program the voice, and they get Pierce Brosnan, and Pierce Brosnan gets obsessed with Marge. I kind of like that. It's
like a Hal.
I could have Pierce Brosnan talking to me. Speaking of which, did you know that there's a movie from the 80s that has Virginia Madsen in it called Electric Dreams, which has kind of like the same, except it's a comedy that has like the same thing. It's about like a love triangle between a guy and a woman and like a computer. That's 1980. That's 1984, man. I really want to see it. Yeah, I don't know any of the other actors, but Virginia Madsen's in it as like the woman.
She really did some crap in the 80s, I'll tell you what.
What's funny is they were talk of a remake, and I was wondering, it's like, wow, does Her feel like a remake? Oh yeah, there's even a thing in here. Fans of Electric Dreams have noted the similarities between the film and Spike Jonze's Her, but when asked about it, Jones claimed not to have seen the former film, which I can believe, because I think most people didn't even know it exists, so. The credits dedicated to the memory of Univac 1, which is a real computer. It was the first commercial computer in the
Univac? States. That sounds like some sort of a sexual device.
Yeah, it was the first like commercially produced computer in America.
Really?
Yeah. Let's see. It came out in. I don't know when it came out, but they were working on it in the early 50s.
Yep. Gonna track down Electric Dreams. Gonna watch that instead of Her.
I think you should. I don't know. I only watched Her once. I guess I could watch it again sometime, but not in the mood right now, I tell you that.
Something that I don't really need to waste my time on.
I don't know. I like Joaquin Phoenix. He plays a really sort of pathetic kind of guy, as you might expect. That it takes kind of like a pathetic kind of guy to fall in love with an operating system or whatever.
Yeah, he's made some odd choices lately, hasn't he?
I mean, I don't really care about him anymore, but there was a time, like I said, when I was really into him and liked him. I think I said back when they were talking about the first Nolan Batman film. I really, at the time, before anybody was cast, I really wanted Guy Pearce to be Bruce Wayne. And then when I was thinking of them doing like Harvey Dent, I wanted Joaquin Phoenix to be Harvey Dent.
I could see that. The new Arrested Development's really good. New season.
Was that out? I've been watching the remix of the fourth one.
I haven't seen the remix yet, but
well, it's been so long since I've seen the fourth season. I can't remember I can't tell how this is different. Now I know it's different because I remember the fourth season, since it was the first one that was like Netflix or whatever. It didn't have the time constraints, so sometimes an episode could be like 25 minutes, sometimes it could be like 31 minutes.
Yeah.
I know this makes them all 22 minutes.
Okay.
But I haven't seen the original way in so long that when I was watching the fourth season, I couldn't tell you how the remix is different. Obviously, some stuff is edited and moved around, but I don't know how. I can't remember. But the new season after that is out now?
Mm-hmm. I think it came out maybe last week.
Oh, nice. Yeah, there's a few things that have just popped up recently on Netflix that I want to see, especially Thor Ragnarok. I might watch that tomorrow.
Oh, cool. I didn't know that was on there.
Well, it's on mine anyway.
I'm sure it's probably on mine too. Let me check.
That's a really great movie.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. Yeah, it's on American too.
Yeah. Spike Jonze, I don't know. Starting to feel like adaptation is really the only thing he did that I actually really like, even though I still like him, but I don't know.
Pretty much just done like Jackass movies, hasn't he? Like in the past few years.
Yeah, he did like that Bad Grandpa movie.
Yeah.
I can't watch a movie like that. I can't. It makes me embarrassed.
Johnny Knoxville has another one coming out. Like that.
Yeah. What's weird is you think he's definitely gotten to the point where he has to age out of these things, and instead he's really revved it up. Which I guess is interesting.
I feel like he's going to be a TMZ breaking news pretty soon.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Dies during stunt. It's called like Danger Academy or some shit, and it's all about a.
Oh God!
Apparently, they did all the stunts. It's a real movie, but they did all the stunts in it. The Jackass people. That's not what it's called. It's some stupid name like that, though. It's
anyway,
Jones with a Z, isn't it?
We're at the risk of dragging this out probably a little bit too much, so I guess we can finish off here and say that was Francois Truffaut with Day for Night, our French filmmaker in our masters. As we said, Jean-Luc Godard could have just as easily been picked, and maybe we'll do one of his down the road. I think it'd be pretty cool to do Breathless, which is a really great movie, and also in that whole vein of French cool new wave movies from the 60s and stuff, Le Samurai is one we wanted to do since the beginning, so we will fit it in at some point, definitely, because we're both big fans of that one. As for what's coming up, as I said, Federico Fellini from Italy, coming right out of the fascist dictatorship of, what's his name's Italy?
Mussolini.
Mussolini's Italy is next. I'm not sure. We haven't decided which movie to do next. For most of these guys, we were trying to do movies that were, a little more off the board and not as well known. With Fellini, I don't know if that's really necessary because I don't know how much people have seen. So obviously the big one that he's really known for is 8.5. And it's possible we might just do that one, but I don't know yet. We'll take a look at the filmography and see what's there and see what's doing. But 8.5 is the big famous one that is definitely the most well-known. But he did quite a few other things too, and that have been... La Dolce Vita might be his most famous one besides that one, which came out just a couple years earlier, which is kind of an interesting movie about like a journalist that works for these gossip magazines that I think that gets mixed up with some sort of like movie star or something like that. Anyway, in the next few days, we will look into his filmography and we'll make a decision about what we will do with him. But that's what's coming next week, and then we will finish off our series with Yasuhiro Ozu, one of his cool films, because I don't know, maybe a lot of it just be me gushing and people watching and be like, why do you like these boring, not moving, black and white Japanese dramas? Like, you'll see why. I don't know. We'll see. It'll be a lot of fun. And then, like I said, going forward into the summer, we'll just go back to, different movies of the week. And we're thinking about maybe doing some horror for, just some sort of lighter you know, fluffy, fun stuff for the summer. So as we always do, we will try to be a little more vigilant on the Twitter to let you guys know what is coming. But anyway, no summer breaks or anything. We'll keep going. Sometimes we miss a day here and there, but we try to make up for it. And so the plan, of course, is next Tuesday. If not, sometime next week for sure. And we'll see you. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. I'm Cole. That's Jay. We thank you very much.
Thanks.